What happens when the woman you discarded for being ordinary turns out to be the most dangerous person you've ever met? Tonight, Marcus Hale would learn that some mistakes don't just cost you, they destroy you. 7 years ago, he married a woman who seemed gentle, simple, forgettable. Tonight, in a room full of the city's most powerful people, he would see her again. But she wouldn't be alone. She'd be standing beside a man whose name made billionaires nervous. And Marcus would finally understand he hadn't divorced a housewife. He'd betrayed a queen. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain came down hard that Thursday evening, drumming against the windows of the small house on Maple Street like it had something to prove. Inside, Alara Quinn moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, her hands steady as she chopped vegetables for dinner. The knife made soft, rhythmic sounds against the cutting board, a sound she'd grown familiar with over 7 years of marriage. 7 years. She paused, the knife hovering above a carrot, and let that number settle in her mind. 7 years of cooking dinners that often went cold. 7 years of keeping a home that rarely felt like one. 7 years of being exactly what Marcus had wanted. Quiet, undemanding, invisible. The front door opened with more force than necessary. Alara didn't flinch. She'd learned to read the way Marcus entered a room, the weight of his footsteps, the particular way he dropped his briefcase, the specific quality of silence that followed. Tonight's entrance spoke of frustration, maybe anger. Nothing new. "You're home early," she said, keeping her voice neutral as she resumed chopping. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, loosening his tie with sharp, irritated movements. At 34, he was handsome in a conventional way. The kind of face that photographed well at corporate events, but revealed very little upon closer inspection. His suit was expensive now, much more so than when they'd first met. Success had given him polish, but had stripped away whatever warmth he'd once possessed. "We need to talk." His voice was flat, businesslike. Alara set down the knife and turned to face him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "All right." She studied him as he stood there, this man she'd chosen to love, this man she'd hidden herself for. Even now, knowing what was probably coming, because there was a particular look in his eyes she'd seen before, a look that said he'd made a decision and her opinion wouldn't matter. Even now, some small part of her hoped she was wrong. "I'm moving out this weekend," Marcus said. No preamble, no cushion for the blow. "My lawyer will contact you about the divorce." The words hung in the air between them, stark and final. Alara's hand stilled on the dish towel. She didn't gasp, didn't cry, didn't ask why or beg him to reconsider. She simply stood there, absorbing the information like she'd absorbed countless small cruelties over the years, silently, completely. "Today's our anniversary," she said quietly. Marcus had the decency to look away, but only for a moment. "Yeah, I know. That's why I wanted to tell you now. Clean break." "A clean break," Alara repeated the word slowly, as if testing their weight. "Is there someone else?" "That's not really relevant." "So, yes." He shrugged, and that casual gesture, that dismissive little movement of his shoulders, said more than any confession could have. He didn't even care enough to deny it properly. "Victoria Ashford," Alara said, not as a question. Marcus's eyes sharpened. "How did you—" "I'm your wife, Marcus, not blind." She folded the dish towel with precise, controlled movements. "You've been taking more calls in the other room, coming home smelling like perfume that isn't mine. That Christmas party last month, you barely left her side. If you knew, why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered?" The question hung between them, unanswered. They both knew the truth. Marcus had stopped caring what she thought long before he'd started looking elsewhere. "Victoria understands my ambitions," Marcus said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "She comes from that world. She can help me get where I need to be. And I can't. Let's be honest, Alara. He gestured vaguely at her, at the kitchen, at their modest home. "This isn't where I belong anymore. I've outgrown it. The partners at the firm, the clients I'm working with now, they're at a different level. Victoria's father owns half the commercial real estate downtown. Her family has connections I need. So I'm not useful anymore." "Don't make this sound so calculated." But it is calculated, isn't it? You're trading up. Alara's voice remained steady, almost eerily calm. I'm curious. When did you decide? When did you look at me and think, she's not enough anymore? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't going how he'd expected. He'd anticipated tears, maybe anger, possibly some desperate attempt to change his mind. This quiet, analytical response unsettled him in ways he couldn't quite name. It wasn't one moment, he said finally. It was gradual. I just realized we want different things. We want different things, Alara repeated softly. That's what you're going with? What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine. I'm sorry it didn't work out, but I'm not sorry for choosing a future that actually has potential. Potential? The word tasted bitter in Alara's mouth. And what was I? Just a placeholder until someone better came along? You're twisting this, am I? For the first time, an edge crept into her voice. Not anger exactly, but something colder. You met me when you were nobody, Marcus. A junior associate drowning in student loans, working 80-hour weeks in a shared office that smelled like burned coffee. I was the one who sat with you through every setback, every time you got passed over for promotion, every client who treated you like dirt. I'm the one who made this house a home while you climbed your ladder. And I appreciate that, but I'm not pretty enough for your new life, not connected enough, not rich enough. Alara's hands were perfectly still now, folded in front of her. You're not even going to pretend there's another reason, are you? Marcus's jaw tightened. You want the truth? Fine. Look at yourself, Alara. When was the last time you went to a salon? When was the last time you bought something that wasn't on sale? You're comfortable with this. He gestured around the kitchen. This small life. I'm not anymore. Small. The word came out barely above a whisper. I'm going to be partner next year. Partner. Do you understand what that means? The events I'll have to attend, the clients I'll need to impress. I need someone who fits that world. Victoria knows how to work a room. She knows what to wear, what to say, who to charm. She makes me look good, and I make you look bad. You make me look ordinary. The words came out harsher than he'd probably intended, but he didn't take them back. I'm not ordinary, Alara. I'm not meant for this middle-class, dinner-at-6, save-for-vacation existence. I never was. Alara absorbed this like she'd absorbed everything else, silently, with that preternatural calm that had always unnerved Marcus when he bothered to notice it. Even now, hearing her marriage dissolve, her 7-year investment dismissed as insufficient, she didn't break. Didn't raise her voice, didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction he could understand. When did you become this person? She asked quietly. What person? Someone who measures people by their usefulness, someone who sees relationships as transactions. Marcus grabbed his briefcase from where he'd dropped it. You know what? I didn't come here to be judged. I came to tell you it's over. My lawyer will be in touch. You can keep the house. I'll take care of the mortgage until we sell it. How generous. Don't be bitter. It doesn't suit you. He paused at the doorway, half turning back. For what it's worth, you were a good wife. You just weren't the right wife. For what it's worth, Alara said softly, you were never the man I thought you were, but I convinced myself you could be. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Maybe guilt, maybe recognition, but it passed quickly. I'll send movers for my things on Saturday. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Marcus? He stopped, waiting. Does Victoria know? Know what? That you're capable of this. That when she stops being useful, when someone better comes along, you'll discard her just as easily as you're discarding me right now. His face hardened. That's the difference between you and her. She's not someone who can be easily replaced. After he left, Alara stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the rain and the sudden profound silence of the house. The vegetables she'd been chopping sat abandoned on the cutting board. The pot of water she had set to boil had gone cold. Everything about the scene spoke of interruption, of a life stopped mid-motion. Slowly, carefully, she walked to the living room and sat down on the couch they'd picked out together 5 years ago. Marcus had wanted leather. She'd convinced him that fabric would be more comfortable. He'd relented, like he'd relented on so many small things back then, Before he'd decided relenting was beneath him. She should cry, she thought distantly. This was the moment for tears. Her marriage was over. Her husband had just told her she wasn't good enough. 7 years had been dismissed as a footnote in his climb to success. This was when women in movies broke down, when they called their friends sobbing, when they threw his clothes out the window or smashed his golf trophies. But Alara didn't cry. She sat in the growing darkness, her hands folded in her lap, and felt something else entirely. Something that had been sleeping for 7 years, buried under layers of careful ordinariness, was beginning to wake up. Her phone sat on the coffee table, its screen dark. She looked at it for a long moment, then picked it up. Her finger hovered over the contacts list, scrolling past names Marcus would recognize. The neighbors, the women from her book club, the couple they sometimes had dinner with. She scrolled further, past the casual acquaintances and surface-level friendships, down to a contact she hadn't opened in 7 years. The name was just an initial, V. Her thumb hovered over it, trembling slightly. This was the line. Once she crossed it, there would be no going back. She could still choose the path Marcus had laid out for her, the quiet divorce, the settlement, the small life he'd accused her of accepting. She could remain Alara Quinn, ordinary and forgettable. Or she could make a different choice. The rain intensified, battering against the windows like it was trying to get in, trying to remind her of something she'd worked so hard to forget. 7 years. 7 years of being small, being quiet, being safe. 7 years of pretending the past didn't exist, that she had no history before Marcus Hale, that she was exactly what she appeared to be. 7 years of lying. She thought about the way Marcus had looked at her tonight, not with hate, which might have been preferable, but with dismissal. Like she was a problem he'd solved, an inconvenience he'd managed, like she was nothing. Her finger pressed down on the contact. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice answered, deep, accented, instantly familiar despite the years. Alara. Not a question. He'd always known it was her, even before caller ID, even across years of silence. I was wondering when you would call. Victor. Her voice was steady, betraying nothing of the storm building inside her. I need to come home. There was a pause, heavy with implication. Then, you were always home, Princessa. You just forgot for a while. I remember now. Good. She could hear the smile in his voice, sharp and satisfied. I'll send a car. 1 hour. Victor? Don't tell him yet. Not until I'm there. Tell who? She closed her eyes. Roman. The name hung in the air between them, carrying weight that would have crushed Marcus Hale if he'd understood what it meant. Roman Volkov. Her husband. Her real husband. The one she'd walked away from 7 years ago, choosing love over power, choosing Marcus over an empire built on blood and loyalty and fear. What a stupid choice that had been. As you wish, Victor said. But Alara? He never signed the papers. Her eyes opened. What? The divorce papers you sent 7 years ago. He never signed them. Legally, technically, in every way that matters, you are still his wife. The information settled over her like snow, cold and covering everything. She thought she'd severed that tie cleanly, that walking away had meant leaving everything behind, but Roman Volkov didn't let go of what was his. Not ever. 1 hour, she repeated. The car will be there. Welcome back, Mrs. Volkov. The line went dead. Alara sat in the darkness, phone still pressed to her ear, and allowed herself one small smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been playing a role for so long they'd almost forgotten it was a performance. The smile of someone who just remembered who they really were. Mrs. Volkov. Not Mrs. Hale. Never really Mrs. Hale. She rose from the couch and walked upstairs to the bedroom she'd shared with Marcus. The closet was half empty already. He'd been moving things out gradually, she realized now. Probably to Victoria's place. Probably for weeks. At the back of her side of the closet, behind the modest dresses and practical shoes, was a locked safe Marcus had never asked about. He'd probably assumed it held jewelry or important documents. He'd been half right. She entered the combination, her real birthday, not the one on her driver's license. And the safe clicked open. Inside was a passport, an ID card, a credit card, and a phone, all under her real name. Elena Volkov, not Ilara Quinn. Elena. The name tasted foreign after so many years, but also familiar, like coming home to a house you'd left in childhood. Beneath those items was a single photograph, creased from handling. She picked it up, studying the faces captured there. Herself, years younger, standing beside a man whose presence dominated the frame even in stillness. Roman Volkov, tall, dark-haired, with eyes that looked black in certain light and revealed nothing except what he wanted you to see. His hand rested on her waist with casual possession, the kind of touch that said, "Mine without words." She'd been 21 in that photo. He'd been 32. She'd been a graduate student studying international relations, smart enough to be useful, but naive enough to think she could handle proximity to a man like him. He'd been the most dangerous person in any room he entered, running operations that spanned continents, making decisions that moved millions of dollars and ended lives with equal efficiency. They'd met at a charity gala her university had forced her to attend. She'd been there on scholarship, wearing a borrowed dress, feeling out of place among Manhattan's elite. He'd been there doing what he always did, moving through legitimate society like a shark through shallow water, making connections, establishing presence, reminding people that he existed in both their world and one they'd never want to see. "You don't belong here," had been his opening line. "Neither do you," she'd responded, too tired of the evening to be diplomatic. He'd laughed, actually laughed. People didn't usually surprise Roman Volkov. 3 months later, they were married. 6 months after that, she understood exactly who she'd bound herself to. A year in, she'd learned what it meant to be married to power, the constant danger, the impossible choices, the blood that never quite washed off, even when your hands stayed clean. And 2 years after that, she'd run. Not from him, exactly. Roman had never hurt her, never threatened her, never treated her as anything less than his equal in private, even when the world saw her as his possession. But she'd run from what being his wife meant, the weight of it, the cost of it, the way violence followed him like a shadow and touched everyone close enough to matter. She'd told herself she wanted a normal life, a safe life, a life where she could be ordinary. She'd chosen Marcus because he was the opposite of everything Roman represented: safe, ambitious in small, understandable ways. Someone who wanted success but not power, wealth but not influence, status but not control. Someone manageable. Someone who would never ask her to be more than she pretended to be. What a joke that had been. Elena, put the photograph back and closed the safe. She packed quickly, efficiently, taking only what mattered. Not the clothes Marcus had bought her, not the jewelry from anniversaries and birthdays. Just the contents of the safe and one item from her nightstand, a simple silver bracelet Roman had given her on their wedding day. She was fastening it around her wrist when headlights swept across the bedroom window. 1 hour, Victor had said. He'd always been precise. The car idling at the curb wasn't a car, really. It was a statement. Black, expensive, with windows tinted so dark they looked like solid obsidian, the kind of vehicle that made neighbors look twice and remember nothing useful. A man stood beside the rear door, not Victor, someone younger, but carrying himself with that particular stillness that marked Roman's people. Trained, dangerous, loyal. Elena walked out of the house on Maple Street without looking back, carrying a single bag. The rain had stopped, leaving everything wet and glistening under the streetlights. The man opened the car door without speaking. She slid inside, and the door closed with the heavy, final sound of a vault ceiling. The interior smelled like leather and gun oil, a combination that brought back memories like a physical blow. Victor was waiting in the seat across from her, older than she remembered, but still carrying himself with that particular blend of elegance and menace that made him Roman's most trusted lieutenant. "You look well," he said in Russian. They'd always spoken Russian together, her and Victor. It had been their private language, the one Marcus never understood. "You look exactly the same," she responded in kind. Lies, but kind ones. He studied her face carefully. "Are you certain? Once we start this, Marcus Hale will understand what he's lost. But more than that, he will understand what he's done. There is no taking that back." "I'm certain. He hurt you. It It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. He dismissed me, like I was nothing, like 7 years of my life were an inconvenience he'd finally solved. Victor's expression didn't change, but something cold moved behind his eyes. Then he will learn what nothing actually looks like. His career, his reputation, his future with the Ashford girl. We will reduce it all to ash. No. Elena's voice was quiet but absolute. Not yet. First, I need to see Roman. I know what he'll want. But this is my decision, Victor. My move. Roman taught me that power is about control, and I'm choosing when and how to use mine. A slight smile crossed Victor's face. You remember then. Good. We were worried 7 years might have made you soft. I was never soft. I was hiding. And now? Now I'm done hiding. The drive into the city took 40 minutes. Elena watched familiar neighborhoods give way to unfamiliar ones, watched the landscape shift from suburban comfort to urban power. They didn't stop at any of Roman's public holdings, the restaurants, the clubs, the legitimate businesses that served as fronts. Instead, they drove to a building in Lower Manhattan that looked unremarkable from the outside, just another luxury apartment complex among dozens. But Elena knew this building, knew the security that lurked beneath its ordinary facade, the systems within systems that protected the man who lived in the penthouse. This was Roman's real home, the one place he could be himself without performance. The elevator required 3 different keys and a biometric scan. It rose without stopping, bypassing every floor until it opened directly into the penthouse. Victor stepped out first, a habit from years of being Roman's shield, then gestured for Elena to follow. The space hadn't changed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that cost more than most people's cars but arranged with an eye for function over display, art that would make museums weep. And in the center of it all, standing with his back to the elevator, looking out at the glittering sprawl of New York, was Roman Volkov. He didn't turn immediately. That was Roman's way, making you wait, making you wonder, maintaining control of every moment. When he finally did turn, Elena's breath caught despite 7 years of telling herself she was over him. He looked older. Not in a bad way. Roman had always had the kind of face that would age into authority rather than obsolescence. But there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He wore a suit that probably cost $10,000, tailored so perfectly it looked like a second skin. His eyes found hers across the room, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Roman smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd just won a bet he'd been waiting 7 years to collect. Hello, Elena. Not Ilara. Elena. Her real name in his voice, rolling with the particular way he said it, making it sound like a threat and a promise. Hello, Roman. Victor quietly disappeared, leaving them alone. The door to the elevator closed with a whisper of expensive machinery. I heard about your husband, Roman said, moving to the bar in the corner and pouring 2 glasses of vodka. The expensive kind, the kind you couldn't buy in stores. Former husband, I should say, though technically you were never really his wife. Marriage requires certain legal freedoms you didn't possess. You never signed the papers. I never received them. He brought her a glass, pressing it into her hand. His fingers brushed hers, deliberate. They were returned to sender. Your lawyer should have mentioned that. She did. I assumed you'd refused. I did refuse, but only after ensuring you never knew. I wanted you to think you were free. He raised his glass. To freedom, and to discovering it was always an illusion. They drank. The vodka burned exactly how Elena remembered. Why? She asked. Why let me think I was divorced when I wasn't? Because you needed to believe you could leave. You needed to think you'd successfully chosen another life. Roman set his glass down, his eyes never leaving hers. If I'd forced you to stay, you would have resented it. Resented me. I wanted you to come back on your own terms, with your own understanding of why you belonged here. That's manipulative. Yes. You could have told me. And ruined 7 years of expensive patience? No. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the exact shade of his eyes. Not quite black, she remembered now, but the darkest brown she'd ever seen. I knew you would come back, Elena. I knew that eventually you would remember who you were. I just had to wait. You sound very certain. I am certain, because I know you. Better than Marcus Hale ever could. Better than you know yourself sometimes. His hand came up, fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. You tried to be ordinary. You tried so hard, but ordinary was never your size. Elena closed her eyes, fighting against the pull of him, the familiar gravity that had drawn her in the first time. He said I made him look ordinary, that I wasn't enough for his new life. Roman's hand stilled. When she opened her eyes, his expression had shifted into something colder, harder. He said that, among other things. Victor mentioned he hurt you. I didn't realize he was stupid enough to insult you. Does it matter? It's over. I left. It matters, Roman said softly, and that soft tone was more dangerous than any amount of anger. Because no one speaks to my wife that way. No one dismisses what is mine. No one. He stepped back, and his control was back in place, perfect and absolute. Makes you feel less than you are. I'm not yours anymore, Roman. I chose to leave. And yet here you stand wearing my bracelet in my home, drinking my vodka. He smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. You can lie to yourself, Princessa, but don't lie to me. You're here because you finally remembered the truth. What truth? That you were never meant for small men with small dreams. That ordinary life, ordinary love, ordinary ambitions, they don't fit you. They never did. He moved to the window, looking out at the city spread below them like a kingdom. You belong here, with me, in this world. You always have. Elena joined him at the window, standing close enough to feel the heat of him, but not quite touching. Below, the city moved and breathed and lived, millions of people pursuing their ordinary dreams in ordinary ways. She'd tried so hard to be one of them. What happens now? She asked. That depends. What do you want to happen? She thought about Marcus, probably at Victoria's place right now, celebrating his successful extraction from an inconvenient marriage. Thought about the way he'd looked at her, like she was a problem solved. Thought about 7 years of making herself smaller, quieter, less. I want him to understand, she said finally. I want Marcus Hale to look at me and realize exactly what he threw away. Revenge, then. Education. She turned to face Roman. I want him to learn the cost of underestimating people, of treating them like disposable commodities. Roman's smile was slow, satisfied, absolutely predatory. I can work with that. Though I should warn you, once we start this, there's no mercy in it. Marcus Hale's life as he knows it will end. His reputation, his career, his future with the Ashford girl, all of it will burn. And everyone will know why. Everyone will know he was married to Elena Volkov and too stupid to understand what that meant. Good. You're sure? Because this isn't just about him anymore. This is about you reclaiming your place, your real place, with me, as my wife, my partner, my equal. No more running, no more hiding. Elena looked at her reflection in the window, superimposed over the glittering city below. For 7 years she'd seen Alara Quinn staring back, soft, gentle, ordinary Alara. But now, standing here in Roman's penthouse, wearing his bracelet, drinking his vodka, she saw someone else entirely. She saw Elena Volkov, the woman she'd been before, the woman she'd tried so hard not to be, the woman she'd always been underneath. I'm sure, she said. Roman's hand found hers, their fingers lacing together with the easy familiarity of years. Then welcome home, my love. Let's remind the world who you are. Outside, the rain started again, but inside, Elena felt warmer than she had in 7 years. Not the comfortable warmth of her marriage to Marcus. That had been a low, steady heat that never quite banished the cold. This was different. This was the heat of a fire building, gathering strength, preparing to consume everything in its path. Marcus Hale had made a mistake, a catastrophic, life-ending mistake. He'd divorced a woman he thought was powerless and ordinary and safe. He'd actually betrayed the wife of the most dangerous man in New York. And now he was going to learn the difference. The first morning back felt like waking up in a body she'd forgotten she owned. Elena stood in the bathroom of Roman's penthouse, their penthouse, she corrected herself, and studied her reflection with clinical detachment. Same face, same hands, same woman who'd chopped vegetables in a modest kitchen 24 hours ago. But something fundamental had shifted, like a bone snapping back into place after years of being set wrong. Roman appeared in the doorway behind her, already dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly salary. He met her eyes in the mirror. "You didn't sleep," he observed. "Neither did you." "I rarely do." He moved closer, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced precision. "Victor's waiting. We have work to do." "Already?" "You wanted Marcus to understand what he lost. That requires preparation." Roman's hand settled on her shoulder, warm through the silk of the robe she'd borrowed. "Unless you've changed your mind." Elena thought about Marcus handing her divorce papers on their anniversary, about the casual cruelty in his voice when he'd called her ordinary, about 7 years of making herself small enough to fit into his vision of a suitable wife. "I haven't changed my mind." "Good. Then get dressed. We have a busy day ahead." An hour later, Elena sat in what Roman called his office, but what was really a war room. 3 walls of windows overlooking Manhattan, the 4th covered in screens displaying information she was only beginning to understand. Victor stood by one of the screens, a tablet in his hands, looking like a professor about to deliver a particularly devastating lecture. "Marcus Anthony Hale," Victor began, his accented English crisp and efficient. 34. Senior associate at Whitmore and Chen, expecting partnership announcement within 6 months. Undergraduate degree from Cornell, law degree from Columbia. Currently residing at 2847 Park Avenue, apartment 14C. "That's Victoria's address," Elena interrupted. Victor's smile was thin. "Indeed. He moved in 3 weeks ago, while still legally married to you, I might add." Roman leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Continue." "Net worth approximately $340,000, most of it tied up in retirement accounts and investment funds managed by Ashford Financial Group. He drives a leased BMW, wears suits he can't quite afford, and spends approximately 30% more than he earns maintaining appearances." Victor swiped to another screen. "His path to partnership depends heavily on securing the Ashford family as permanent clients. Victoria's father, Richard Ashford, controls a commercial real estate portfolio worth approximately $800 million. "So Marcus isn't just dating Victoria," Elena said slowly. "He's courting her father's business." "Precisely. The partnership at Whitmore and Chen isn't guaranteed by merit alone. It requires bringing significant clients to the firm. Marcus has been positioning himself as the Ashford family's primary legal counsel for their East Coast acquisitions." Roman's expression hadn't changed. But Elena knew him well enough to recognize the particular stillness that meant his mind was working through scenarios, calculating moves and countermoves like a chess grandmaster. "What about Victoria?" Elena asked. "What's her angle?" Victor pulled up a new screen, this one showing a polished headshot of a woman in her late 20s. Blonde, beautiful in the way money could buy, good bones, better orthodontics, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Victoria Ashford looked like she'd been born at a country club and raised on the assumption that the world existed for her convenience. Victoria Constance Ashford, 28, MBA from Wharton, currently Vice President of Acquisitions at Ashford Financial, a position created specifically for her. Victor's tone was carefully neutral, but Elena heard the disdain underneath. "She's intelligent enough, but plays at being more capable than she is. Her father indulges her. Her mother drinks. Her brother—" "Wait," Elena interrupted. "She has a brother?" "Christopher Ashford, 32, the actual heir to the Ashford Empire, currently running their West Coast operations from San Francisco. By all accounts, he's the competent one. Victoria is the spare, the pretty face they trot out for charity galas and business dinners." Elena absorbed this, feeling pieces of a puzzle slot into place. So Victoria needs Marcus as much as he needs her. She wants legitimacy. A husband with his own career, someone who makes her look serious instead of decorative. "Very good," Roman murmured. "You always did understand power dynamics." "I had an excellent teacher." Elena turned to Victor. "What else?" Marcus has been careful. No public announcement of divorce yet, no social media posts with Victoria, nothing that could complicate his image as a stable, trustworthy attorney. He's waiting until the divorce is finalized and enough time has passed to avoid looking opportunistic. How considerate of him! Indeed. However, his lawyer filed the initial paperwork yesterday morning. Uncontested divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. He's offering you the house, as promised, and a settlement of $50,000. The number hung in the air, almost insulting in its modesty. 7 years of marriage, valued at less than Marcus probably spent on his car. Roman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Generous. I don't want his money, Elena said quietly. Of course not. You have your own. Roman gestured to Victor, who pulled up another screen, this one showing account balances that made Elena's breath catch. The trust I established for you 7 years ago has been growing steadily, currently worth approximately $12 million, conservatively invested, generating roughly $400,000 annually in passive income. Elena stared at the numbers. I didn't know. You didn't ask. But I would never leave you unprotected, Elena. Whether you were with me or not, you were still my wife. Still my responsibility. Roman's voice softened slightly. Still mine. The possessiveness should have bothered her. 7 years ago, it had that sense of being owned, being an asset in Roman's carefully managed portfolio of power and influence. But sitting here now, looking at proof that he'd spent 7 years protecting her even when she'd walked away, Elena felt something else entirely. Not gratitude exactly, something more complex. So what's the plan? She asked, pushing those thoughts aside. Roman exchanged a glance with Victor, and Elena recognized that look. They'd already discussed this, already mapped out the strategy. They were just waiting to see if she'd approve. We dismantle him, Roman said simply. Carefully, systematically, in ways that look like bad luck and poor judgment rather than active sabotage. We start with his professional reputation, move to his personal relationships, and end with his future. By the time we're finished, Marcus Hale will understand exactly what he had and what he lost. That sounds like it could take months. Weeks, actually. Victor's already begun the preliminary work. Elena turned to Victor, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. You were that certain I'd want revenge? I was that certain you'd want justice, Victor corrected. Revenge is emotional. This is simply correction. Marcus Hale made decisions based on incomplete information. We're merely providing him with the full picture. Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. Victor had always been good at making destruction sound like education. Walk me through it, she said. Roman stood, moving to the windows with that particular grace that had always made Elena think of predators. Efficient, economical, absolutely focused. Whitmore and Chen is a mid-tier firm with aspirations. They want to break into the top 20 corporate law firms in New York. Marcus's partnership depends on two things: billable hours and client acquisition. He's adequate on the first, betting everything on the second. The Ashford account. Exactly. But the Ashford account isn't as secure as Marcus thinks. Richard Ashford is old money trying to play in new money's world. He's hemorrhaging investments, making poor decisions, propping up failures with increasingly creative accounting. His company is worth $800 million on paper, but the actual liquid assets, much less. Victor tapped his tablet, bringing up financial statements that Elena suspected weren't meant for public consumption. Ashford Financial is approximately 18 months from serious trouble. They're overleveraged on several properties, betting on development deals that won't mature for years, and bleeding cash on maintenance for buildings they can't fill with tenants. How do you know all this? Roman's smile was sharp. Because 3 of those buildings are in neighborhoods I control. I've been watching Richard Ashford struggle for months, wondering when he'd get desperate enough to make a mistake. And now? Now we accelerate his timeline, put pressure where it hurts, make his situation visible to the right people. Roman returned to his seat, leaning forward with his elbows on the desk. Richard Ashford needs a lifeline. I'm going to offer him one, but it comes with conditions that won't include his daughter's boyfriend as primary legal counsel. Elena processed this. You're going to save his company. I'm going to buy part of his company, enough to have a seat at the table, enough to influence decisions like which law firm they retain. Roman's eyes met hers. And we definitely won't be retaining Whitmore and Chen. That destroys Marcus's partnership. That's the idea. What about Victoria? Victor took this one. Victoria is a problem that solves itself. Once Marcus loses his value as the Ashford family attorney, he becomes just another moderately successful lawyer dating the boss's daughter. Richard Ashford tolerates him now because he's useful. Without that usefulness, he's just the man taking his daughter to dinner on his dime. Precisely. Richard Ashford is old-fashioned about certain things. He believes his daughter should marry well, which, in his definition, means old money, established name, preferably someone from the same country club circuit he runs in. Marcus Hale is new money at best, no money more realistically. A temporary diversion, acceptable only because he brought business value. Roman picked up the thread. We remove the business value, and suddenly Richard starts paying attention, starts asking questions about Marcus's background, his prospects, his intentions. Starts comparing him to the other options available for Victoria, men with trust funds and family names that open doors. And Victoria? Elena asked. Does she actually care about Marcus, or is he just useful to her too? Victor pulled up what looked like text messages, though Elena didn't ask how he'd obtained them. See for yourself. Elena leaned forward, reading. The messages were between Victoria and someone named Jennifer, apparently her best friend. The conversation was recent, from 2 days ago, right around the time Marcus was serving Elena with divorce papers. Jennifer. How's the new living arrangement? Victoria. Fine. Marcus is easier than I expected. Grateful, you know. Jennifer. Grateful is good, LOL. Better than entitled. Victoria. Right? Like, he actually thanks me for things. It's almost cute. Very different from the trust fund babies Daddy usually pushes. Jennifer. You really like him? Victoria. I like that he works for what he has. Makes me look less frivolous by association. Plus he's good looking and doesn't embarrass me at events. Jennifer. That's romantic? AF Victoria. Oh, please. You know I don't do romance. I do strategic. Marcus fits into my 5-year plan. Good stepping stone. Jennifer. Cold. I love it. What's the plan after? Victoria. After? Depends. If he makes partner and brings in good clients, maybe I keep him around. If not, there's always other options. Elena sat back feeling oddly vindicated, so it wasn't love on either side. Just two people using each other, convinced they were the ones in control. She's exactly like him, Elena said quietly. Yes, Roman agreed, which is why this will work so cleanly. Neither of them actually cares about the other. They care about what the other represents. Remove that representation, and the whole structure collapses. When do we start? Victor started yesterday. Today we accelerate. Roman checked his watch, an understated Patek Philippe that costs more than most cars. In approximately 2 hours, I have a meeting with Richard Ashford. He doesn't know it yet, but his company is about to receive a very attractive offer. He'll take it? He doesn't have a choice. He's drowning, and I'm offering him a life preserver. Pride is expensive. He'll swallow his and take the deal. Victor closed his tablet. While Roman handles Ashford, you and I have other work to do. What kind of work? The kind that reintroduces Elena Volkov to society. You've been gone 7 years. People have forgotten you. We need to remind them. The idea sent a chill through Elena. Not fear, exactly, but anticipation mixed with dread. For 7 years she'd been invisible. Quiet Alara Quinn, Marcus Hale's ordinary wife. Unimportant and easily overlooked. Stepping back into visibility, as Elena Volkov meant accepting everything that came with that name. The attention, the danger, the power, the cost. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, she admitted. Roman stood, moving around the desk to where she sat. He knelt in front of her chair, bringing them eye to eye, something he rarely did, making himself physically lower than anyone else. It was a gesture of intimacy, of trust, and it hit Elena harder than any of his earlier possessiveness. You were always ready, he said quietly, his hands covering hers. You were ready when I met you. You were ready when you walked away. You've been ready every moment since, just pointed in the wrong direction. All we're doing now is correcting your aim. What if I fail? You won't. You can't know that. I can. Because I know you. Because I've watched you hide brilliance for 7 years, and it only made you sharper. Because Marcus Hale tried to diminish you, and you're here instead of broken. His grip tightened slightly. You're not the girl who married me, Elena. You're better, smarter, harder where it counts, and now you're angry, which makes you dangerous. I'm not trying to be dangerous. I know. That's what makes it perfect. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come on. Victor's right. We have work to do, starting with your wardrobe. What's wrong with my wardrobe? Roman and Victor exchanged a look that would have been funny in other circumstances. Elara Quinn's wardrobe was very practical, Victor said diplomatically. Elena Volkov requires something different. 3 hours later, Elena understood what they meant. The boutique Victor had brought her to didn't have a name on the door, didn't advertise, didn't cater to anyone who needed to ask prices. The owner, a severe woman named Anastasia, who looked like she'd been carved from ice, had taken one look at Elena and immediately begun pulling clothes with the precision of a surgeon selecting instruments. No, Anastasia said sharply when Elena reached for a navy dress that looked similar to things she'd worn as Marcus's wife. That is for women who want to disappear. You are not disappearing anymore. Instead, she handed Elena a dress in deep emerald silk that probably cost more than Elena's monthly grocery budget used to be. It fit perfectly, skimming her body in ways that suggested rather than displayed, elegant without being modest, powerful without being aggressive. Better, Anastasia approved. Now you look like someone worth noticing. They spent 2 more hours building what Anastasia called a proper foundation: dresses, suits, casual wear, accessories, shoes. Everything in colors that complemented Elena's skin tone, cuts that flattered her figure, fabrics that spoke of wealth without screaming it. This wasn't fashion. This was armor. Victor watched the entire process from a chair in the corner, occasionally nodding approval or suggesting alternatives. When Anastasia finally declared them finished, he stood and handed her a card that she accepted without looking at it. Send everything to the penthouse, he instructed. And Anastasia, discretion, as always. Of course, Victor Mikhailovich. It's always a pleasure dressing powerful women. Back in the car, Elena studied Victor's profile as their driver navigated Manhattan traffic. How long have you been planning this? Planning what? Don't play dumb. The boutique that just happens to be available on a Thursday afternoon. The owner who knows exactly what I need without asking. The wardrobe that fits perfectly without alterations. You've been preparing for this. Victor's smile was small but genuine. Roman and I discussed various scenarios. This was one of them. You really thought I'd come back? We hoped. There's a difference. He turned to face her fully. Elena, you need to understand something. These 7 years were not easy for Roman. He is not a patient man by nature. Waiting for you required discipline that cost him, but he never wavered, never considered moving on, never stopped believing you would remember who you were. That's a lot of faith in someone who left him. No, it's a lot of understanding of why you left and what it would take for you to return. Victor's expression softened slightly. You left because you were afraid of what this life would make you. You're returning because you've learned that hiding from power doesn't make you safe. It makes you vulnerable. That's growth. Roman recognizes it. Elena looked out the window at the city sliding past. What if I can't do this? What if I'm not the person you both think I am? Then you fail, and we adjust. But Elena, you won't fail. I've watched you for 7 years. Yes, we've been keeping track. And you never stopped being strategic, never stopped being intelligent, never stopped seeing patterns others miss. You simply applied those skills to being invisible instead of powerful. Now you're redirecting them. That's all. The car pulled up in front of a building Elena didn't recognize. Modern, expensive, with security that looked military rather than commercial. Where are we? Your new office? Well, one of them. Roman thought you might want space of your own, separate from his, somewhere you can work without feeling like his appendage. Elena followed Victor inside through security that clearly expected them, up an elevator that required biometric identification. The office was on the 32nd floor, with windows overlooking Central Park and furniture that managed to be both beautiful and functional. Work on what? Elena asked, running her hand along a desk that probably cost more than her car used to. Whatever you want. Roman's empire is vast, Elena. There's always room for someone with your skills. Victor handed her a tablet. These are various projects that could use oversight. Real estate development, legitimate investment portfolios, charity organizations that need directors. Choose what interests you, or create something new. The point is establishing your independent presence. Elena scrolled through the options, each one representing millions of dollars and hundreds of decisions. A year ago, she would have been overwhelmed. Now she found herself analyzing opportunities, seeing angles, understanding implications. This one, she said, tapping a file labeled Meridian Arts Foundation. What is it? A struggling nonprofit that provides arts education in underserved communities. Good mission, poor execution, bleeding money. Roman acquired it 6 months ago to prevent closure, but hasn't decided what to do with it. I want it. Victor raised an eyebrow. It's a mess. Mismanaged funds, disorganized programs, board members who care more about tax deductions than actual impact. Fixing it would take real work. Good. I want something that matters. Something that isn't about money or power or revenge. Elena set the tablet down. If I'm coming back to this world, I'm doing it on my terms. That means using this position for something beyond just destroying Marcus Hale. For the first time since she'd known him, Victor looked genuinely impressed. Roman will approve. He's always believed power without purpose is just expensive cruelty. Then set it up. I want control of the foundation, full operational authority. I'll clean it up, make it functional, turn it into something worth the money being poured into it. Done. I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. Victor checked his phone. Roman's meeting with Ashford should be wrapping up. Let's head back. He'll want to brief you on how it went. The drive back to the penthouse felt different than the drive out. Elena watched the city with new eyes, not as a place she was hiding in, but as a place she was claiming. Every building, every street, every carefully maintained illusion of order had Roman's fingerprints somewhere on it, and now, by extension, hers. Roman was waiting when they arrived, sitting in his usual chair with a glass of scotch and an expression that told Elena the meeting had gone exactly as planned. Well? She asked, taking the seat across from him. Richard Ashford is now my business partner. I acquired 40% of Ashford Financial for $320 million, with operational control of their legal and financial oversight. Roman's smile was satisfied, almost lazy. He was so grateful he nearly wept. And Marcus? Was not mentioned. Richard brought him up once, praising his work on a recent contract. I expressed mild interest and suggested we might want to bring in additional counsel for the larger deals moving forward. Boutique firms with specialized experience. Roman swirled his scotch. I dropped the names of 3 competing firms, all larger and more prestigious than Whitmore and Chen. You should have seen his face. He understood immediately. That Marcus just became redundant. Exactly. Richard's already recalculating. I could see it happening in real time, realizing that keeping Marcus as primary counsel was limiting his options, that my investment came with expectations of operating at a higher level. He'll phase Marcus out gradually, probably over the next few weeks. Professional, polite, absolutely final. Victor settled into a third chair, pulling out his tablet. I've already sent anonymous tips to the partnership committee at Whitmore and Chen. Nothing actionable, just concerns about Marcus's client development strategy. Questions about whether the Ashford account is as secure as he's been claiming. They'll start asking questions, making him prove value he can't deliver anymore. Elena absorbed this, watching Roman and Victor work together with the smooth efficiency of years of partnership. This was what she'd walked away from. Not just Roman, but this whole machine of influence and power and carefully orchestrated consequences. Part of her still recoiled from it. Part of her felt like she'd come home. When will Marcus realize what's happening? She asked. Hard to say. Next week, probably, when Richard starts missing calls or rescheduling meetings. Maybe sooner, if he's paying attention to subtle shifts in how he's being treated. Roman set down his glass. But the real moment of understanding won't come until later. Until he sees you again and makes the connection. Where will that happen? Oh, the Garrison Charity Gala, 3 weeks from now. Everyone who matters will be there, including Richard and Victoria Ashford, including almost certainly Marcus himself, since he'll be desperate to maintain the connection. Roman's eyes glinted, and also including us, Mr. and Mrs. Volkov, making their first public appearance together in 7 years. Yeet. The idea sent electricity through Elena's nerves. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to become someone who could stand in that room and own it. 3 weeks to transform from Alara Quinn into Elena Volkov in ways that would leave no doubt about which version was real. "I'll need more than new clothes," she said quietly. "I know, that's why we have 3 weeks. Roman stood, offering his hand. "Come on, let's start with dinner. Tomorrow, the real work begins." Victor's already assembled a team: legal advisors, image consultants, security, people who understand how to manage a public profile. By the time we walk into that gala, you'll be ready. Elena took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. "And if I'm not?" "Then we improvise. We're very good at that." Roman's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gesture so familiar it hurt. "But you will be ready, Elena, because you're not doing this alone. Not anymore." That night, after dinner and hours of planning and Victor finally leaving them alone, Elena stood in the bathroom brushing her teeth and thought about Marcus. Wondered what he was doing right now. Probably at Victoria's apartment, probably celebrating his successful divorce, probably convinced he'd made the smart choice. He had no idea what was coming. No idea that every assumption he'd built his future on was already crumbling. No idea that the ordinary woman he'd discarded was orchestrating his downfall with the kind of precision he couldn't imagine. Roman appeared behind her, already changed for bed. "You're thinking too loud. Just wondering if we're going too far." "Do you actually think that? Or are you testing whether I'll give you permission to back out?" Elena met his eyes in the mirror. "Maybe both." "Then let me be clear. What we're doing to Marcus Hale is measured, proportional, and frankly less than he deserves for how he treated you. We're not destroying his life. We're removing the unearned advantages he was planning to exploit. He'll survive. He just won't thrive at your expense." Roman's hand settled on her shoulders. "If you want to stop, we stop. But don't confuse mercy with weakness, Elena. Marcus showed you who he was. We're simply making sure everyone else sees it too." She turned to face him, close enough to feel his breath. "I'm not used to this version of myself yet." "I know, but you will be." He kissed her forehead, gentle despite everything else about him. "Come to bed. Tomorrow we start preparing you for war. Tonight, just rest." But Elena didn't rest. She lay awake long after Roman's breathing evened out, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the woman she used to be, the woman she'd tried to become, and the woman she was becoming now. None of them fit perfectly. None of them felt completely true. Maybe that was the point. Maybe she'd never be just one thing, not Alara, not Elena, not the quiet wife or the powerful queen. Maybe she'd always be somewhere in between, navigating the space where love and power intersected, where vulnerability and strength coexisted in uncomfortable tension. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "Divorce papers will be filed officially tomorrow. Please confirm receipt of settlement agreement. J. Morrison, attorney at law." Marcus's lawyer, probably. Doing the polite, professional thing, making sure everything was documented and proper. Elena deleted the message without responding. Let them wonder. Let Marcus start to feel the first whispers of uncertainty, the first suggestion that maybe this wasn't going as smoothly as he'd planned. The game had started. And this time, Elena knew exactly what she was playing for. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of controlled chaos that reminded Elena why she'd left this world in the first place, and why, despite everything, part of her had always missed it. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened in increments, in small adjustments and carefully orchestrated appearances, in learning to walk like someone who expected doors to open before she reached them. Anastasia had been right about the clothes being armor, but Elena quickly discovered she needed more than fabric and tailoring. She needed posture, presence, the particular brand of confidence that came from knowing exactly who you were and not apologizing for it. "Your shoulders," the consultant, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret, who'd apparently taught deportment to actual royalty, said for the 15th time that morning, "You're still hunching like you're trying to take up less space. Stop it." Elena straightened, feeling the pull in muscles that had spent 7 years curling inward. "Better. Now walk across the room like you own it." "I don't own it." "Roman does, which means you do. Walk." Elena crossed the office space, hyper-aware of every step, every movement. It felt performative, fake, like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. "Still thinking too much," Margaret observed. "You're calculating every step. Stop. Just walk. You've done this before." "That was years ago." "Muscle memory doesn't forget. Your body knows how to do this. Your mind just needs to get out of the way." Margaret stood, demonstrating with the kind of effortless grace that came from decades of practice. "Watch. I'm not thinking about my feet or my posture or how I look. I'm thinking about where I'm going and why I deserve to get there. The rest follows." Elena tried again, this time focusing less on the mechanics and more on the destination. It felt marginally less awkward. "Improving," Margaret allowed. "We'll practice more tomorrow. For now, your language coach is waiting." The language coach turned out to be unnecessary. Elena's Russian had stayed sharp during her years away. She'd spoken it to herself sometimes, late at night when Marcus was working, just to keep the pathways open in her brain. But Victor had insisted on the session anyway, claiming they needed to refine her accent for formal settings. "You speak like someone who learned Russian in Moscow," the coach Dmitri explained in flawless Russian, "which is fine for casual conversation. But in certain circles, the circles you'll be moving in, there are subtle distinctions. Old money versus new money, Petersburg versus Moscow. These things matter to people who notice such details. And Roman wants me to speak like old money from Petersburg? Roman wants you to speak like yourself, but with Polish. There's a difference." Dmitri tilted his head, studying her. "Tell me, when you met Roman, how did you speak?" Elena thought back to that night at the charity gala, when she'd been a scholarship student in a borrowed dress trying not to feel out of place. Carefully. "I was nervous. And now? Now I'm still nervous, just better at hiding it." Dmitri smiled. "Then we have something to work with. Nervousness isn't your enemy, Elena. Showing it is. Let's practice turning anxiety into authority." They spent 2 hours on inflection and emphasis, on the small verbal cues that separated uncertainty from controlled determination. Elena left the session exhausted but oddly energized, like she'd been exercising muscles she'd forgotten she had. Victor was waiting when she emerged, checking his phone with the distracted efficiency of someone managing multiple crises simultaneously. "How'd it go?" he asked without looking up. "I feel like I'm back in school." "You are, in a way. Graduate-level coursework in being Elena Volkov." He pocketed his phone. "Ready for the hard part?" "That wasn't the hard part?" "That was preparation. Now we handle the foundation." The Meridian Arts Foundation occupied 3 floors of a building in Brooklyn that had probably been beautiful once, but now just looked tired. The lobby smelled like old coffee and desperation. The receptionist, a young woman who looked fresh out of college, barely glanced up when they entered. "Can I help you?" "Elena Volkov to see the board," Victor said pleasantly. "They're expecting us." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at the name, and Elena felt a small thrill of satisfaction. So they'd heard of her. Good. The conference room on the 3rd floor held 7 people, all of whom stood when Elena and Victor entered. They ranged in age from late 40s to early 70s, dressed in the particular style of nonprofit professionals, expensive enough to suggest competence, not so expensive as to suggest misappropriation of funds. "Mrs. Volkov, a man in his 60s said, extending his hand. "David Chen, board chair. We're honored to meet you." Elena shook his hand with exactly the right amount of firmness, Margaret's lessons already proving useful. "Thank you for making time. I know this was short notice." "Not at all. When we heard you'd be taking over operational control." He trailed off, gesturing to the table. "Please, sit. We're eager to hear your vision." Elena took the head of the table. Victor had coached her on this, on claiming physical space as well as authority, and spent the next 10 minutes laying out exactly what she'd discovered about the Foundation's problems and exactly how she planned to fix them. "The mission is solid," she said, pulling up financial statements on the presentation screen. "Arts education for underserved youth is valuable and needed, but the execution is scattered. You're trying to do too much with too few resources, spreading yourself thin across programs that duplicate efforts and compete for the same funding." David shifted uncomfortably. "We wanted to serve as many children as possible, which is admirable, but serving many badly isn't better than serving fewer well. Look at these numbers." Elena highlighted several programs. 3 different after-school music initiatives in 3 different boroughs, each with separate administrative overhead, separate facilities costs, separate instructor salaries. They're cannibalizing each other's resources and effectiveness. A woman at the other end of the table, Caroline something, Elena remembered from the briefing materials, cleared her throat. "We felt it was important to have a presence across the city." Presence without impact is just marketing, and expensive marketing at that. Elena pulled up another slide. "Here's what I'm proposing. Consolidate the music programs into one flagship initiative with multiple locations sharing resources. Same for visual arts and theater. Reduce administrative redundancy, invest the savings in program quality and instructor pay. We focus on doing 3 things exceptionally instead of 10 things adequately." The room was silent for a moment. Then David spoke carefully. "That's a significant restructuring. Some of our board members have emotional attachments to specific programs. I understand. Change is difficult, but emotional attachment doesn't pay the bills or serve the children." Elena met his gaze squarely. "This foundation has been running on goodwill and diminishing returns. You've already cut staff twice this year. You're 3 months from making a 3rd round of cuts that will gut your effectiveness entirely. We can continue down that path, or we can make hard choices now and build something sustainable." Caroline's expression had gone from defensive to thoughtful. "What kind of timeline are you looking at?" 6 months for full implementation, 3 months for initial consolidation." Elena clicked to a detailed timeline she and Victor had prepared. "I'll be hands-on during the transition. This isn't a takeover where I issue directives and disappear. I'll be here, working with staff, managing the changes, taking responsibility for outcomes." "That's more involved than we expected," David admitted. "Good. You should expect involvement. This isn't a vanity project for me. If I'm putting my name on this foundation, it's going to actually work." Elena leaned forward slightly. "I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to make this organization effective. If that's not something you can support, now's the time to say so." She could feel Victor's approval from across the room, could sense that she'd hit exactly the right note of authority, tempered with practicality. The board members exchanged glances, having silent conversations with expressions and small gestures. Finally, David nodded. "We appreciate your candor, Mrs. Volkov, and your commitment. I think I speak for the board when I say we're willing to give your proposal serious consideration." "Good. You have until the end of the week to decide. After that, I'll need a firm commitment or I'll redirect my resources elsewhere." Elena stood, signaling the meeting's end. "Victor will send over detailed implementation plans. Read them carefully. Come prepared with questions." The board members filed out, leaving Elena and Victor alone in the conference room. She waited until the door closed before letting out a long breath. "How'd I do?" "You terrified them. It was perfect." Victor gathered the presentation materials. "David will call by tomorrow with full support. They need you too badly to say no, and you just demonstrated exactly the kind of decisive leadership they've been lacking. I feel like I just bullied a bunch of people trying to help kids. You gave them structure and direction. There's a difference." Victor's expression softened slightly. "Elena, you did well. Better than well. You walked in there as the person writing the checks and left as the person they'll actually listen to. That's not easy." Elena sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. "Is it always this tiring?" "Leading? Yes, but it gets easier. The first time you assert authority is always the hardest because you're fighting your own uncertainty as much as anyone else's resistance." He checked his watch. "Come on, Roman's expecting us for dinner, and you have a fitting afterward." "Another fitting?" "For the gala. Anastasia finished your dress." The dress, when Elena saw it that evening, took her breath away. Deep midnight blue that looked almost black in certain light, with a neckline that suggested elegance without modesty, a back that dipped low enough to make a statement. It fit like it had been grown on her body rather than sewn. "This is too much," Elena said, staring at her reflection. "This is exactly right," Anastasia corrected, adjusting the fall of the fabric across Elena's hips. "You are not walking into that gala to blend in. You're walking in to remind everyone who forgot about Elena Volkov that she never actually left. This dress does that. It makes me look powerful, dangerous, beautiful, all the things you are." Anastasia stepped back, satisfied with her work. "Marcus Hale will see you in this dress and realize he never actually knew you at all." That image, Marcus's face when he saw her, had been living in Elena's mind for days now. She'd imagined it 100 different ways, tried to predict his reaction, prepare for various scenarios. But standing here in this dress, she realized none of her imaginings had captured the reality of what she was becoming. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. The next week brought a different kind of challenge. Roman insisted Elena start appearing at his side for business dinners, quiet meetings where deals were made and alliances formed. Nothing flashy, nothing public yet, just steady presence, reminding his associates that he had a wife and she was back. The first dinner was at a restaurant that didn't have prices on the menu, never a good sign in Elena's experience. Their companions were an older couple, the Dmitrievs, who ran shipping operations out of New Jersey. Victor had briefed her beforehand. Old family friends, powerful but not flashy, deeply traditional. Mrs. Dmitriev studied Elena with sharp eyes over appetizers. "So you're the one who left?" Elena felt Roman tense slightly beside her, but she kept her expression calm. "I am. And now you're back." "I am. Why?" The bluntness would have thrown Alara Quinn off balance, but Elena Volkov knew how to handle directness with more directness. "Because I was wrong to leave, because I thought I wanted something different and discovered I wanted what I'd always had." She met Mrs. Dmitriev's gaze steadily. "Because Roman was patient enough to let me figure that out." Mrs. Dmitriev's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Approval, maybe, or at least acceptance. "Honest. Good. I was worried he'd found someone who'd tell him what he wanted to hear. I've never been good at that." "Also good." Mrs. Dmitriev turned to Roman. "She's sharper than I remembered, less nervous." "She's had time to find her footing," Roman said, his hand finding Elena's under the table. The rest of the dinner passed more smoothly, conversation flowing between business and personal topics with the ease of old friends. Elena contributed where appropriate, stayed quiet when she didn't have anything useful to add, and watched Roman work the room with the skill of someone who'd spent decades perfecting the art of appearing relaxed while calculating constantly. Driving home afterward, Roman was quiet until they were almost back to the penthouse. "You handled Irina well," he said finally. "She was testing me." "Of course she was. Everyone will test you at first. They need to know if you're really back or just visiting." He pulled into the garage, killing the engine but not moving to get out. "For what it's worth, you passed. Irina doesn't give approval easily." "I noticed. What would have happened if I hadn't passed?" "Nothing dramatic, just quiet doubt, spread through whispers and careful suggestions. The kind of thing that undermines authority without direct confrontation." Roman turned to face her. "This world we live in, it's built on perception as much as reality. People need to believe you're strong before they'll let you be strong. Tonight, you gave them reason to believe." Elena absorbed this, thinking about all the small performances that made up daily life in Roman's world. Does it ever feel exhausting? Constantly being watched, constantly being evaluated? Every day. But the alternative, being invisible, being dismissed, is worse. You know that now. He was right, and they both knew it. Elena had spent 7 years being invisible, and it had bought her exactly nothing except the pain of discovering her invisibility was the only thing Marcus had valued about her. The second week brought news that Victor delivered with barely concealed satisfaction. Marcus had been called into a meeting with the senior partners at Whitmore and Chen. The Ashford account was being reevaluated for strategic alignment. His billable hours were under review. Questions were being asked about his client development strategy and whether his projections had been overly optimistic. "He's trying to reach Richard Ashford," Victor reported, scrolling through communications they definitely shouldn't have access to but somehow did. 4 calls today, all going to voicemail. 2 emails politely deflected by Richard's assistant. He's starting to panic. "Good," Roman said absently, reviewing contracts on his own tablet. "Let him panic. Panic makes people stupid." Elena, sitting across from both of them in Roman's office, felt a twist of something uncomfortable in her chest. Satisfaction, yes, but also something darker. What happens when he realizes Victoria's father is cutting him out? He'll try harder, get desperate, probably make mistakes that accelerate his downfall. Roman looked up. "Having second thoughts?" "No, just wondering if we're enjoying this too much." "I'm not enjoying it at all," Roman said mildly. "I'm simply ensuring that someone who hurt my wife understands consequences. There's no emotion in it for me." But there was emotion in it for Elena, she realized. A complicated tangle of vindication and guilt, power and uncertainty. She'd wanted Marcus to suffer, wanted him to understand what he'd thrown away. Now that it was actually happening, the reality felt different than the fantasy. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and a slow smile spread across his face. Victoria just posted to social media. Dinner at Le Cirque with her father and several business associates. No Marcus in any of the photos. "Let me see," Elena said, and Victor handed over the phone. The photos showed Victoria in an expensive dress, smiling at the camera with that particular influencer enthusiasm that suggested heavy filtering and careful angles. Richard Ashford sat at the head of the table, surrounded by people who looked important. No empty chair for Marcus. No tag mentioning him. It was like he didn't exist. Elena handed back the phone. She's already distancing herself. Of course. Victoria's smart enough to read the room. Her father's cooling on Marcus, so she is too. Give it another week and she'll have convinced herself the relationship was never serious anyway. Victor pocketed his phone. Actually works in our favor. When Marcus crashes, there'll be no one to catch him. The observation was clinical, efficient, and absolutely ruthless. This was the world Elena had rejoined. A world where people were assets or obstacles, where loyalty lasted exactly as long as usefulness, where someone's complete destruction could be discussed over coffee with the same emotional investment as discussing the weather. She'd forgotten how cold it could be. Or maybe she'd just convinced herself that Marcus's world was different, that outside Roman's influence people operated with more empathy and less calculation. What a stupid assumption that had been. Marcus had proven to be just as transactional as anyone in Roman's circle, just with a smaller budget and less sophisticated execution. "I need air," Elena said abruptly, standing. Roman looked up, concerned. "You all right?" "Fine, just need to walk. Clear my head. I'll send someone with you." "Roman, non-negotiable. You know the rules." His voice was gentle but absolute. "Victor, have Mikhail meet her downstairs." Elena wanted to argue, but she knew better. Roman's security protocols weren't suggestions, and after 7 years away, she'd lost the privilege of fighting him on them. She rode the elevator down in silence, met Mikhail, a quiet man built like a wall who'd been with Roman for years, in the lobby, and walked out into the cool evening air. The city at night had always been Elena's favorite version of New York. The harsh edges softened, the chaos organized into patterns of light and shadow. She walked without destination, Mikhail trailing 10 feet behind, and tried to sort through the tangle of emotions competing for space in her chest. She'd wanted this, wanted to hurt Marcus, wanted him to understand what he'd lost, wanted the power to make him suffer the way his dismissal had made her suffer. And now that she had it, now that the machinery of his destruction was in motion, she felt, what? Not regret exactly, not guilt for something he'd earned, but maybe uncertainty about what it said about her that she could orchestrate someone's downfall this efficiently and sleep fine afterward. Her phone rang. Roman, probably checking on her, but the screen showed an unknown number. Elena almost didn't answer. Then curiosity won out. "Hello? Alara?" The voice was familiar but unexpected. "Sharon, one of the women from her old book club. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I know things have been… Well, Marcus said you two were splitting up. We are. Elena kept her voice neutral, wondering where this was going. I'm so sorry. I know how hard that must be. Listen, some of us were talking, and we wanted you to know we're here if you need anything. Coffee, a shoulder to cry on, whatever. The kindness in Sharon's voice hit Elena unexpectedly hard. These women had been her friends for years, or at least her friendly acquaintances. They'd shared book discussions and coffee dates and occasional dinners. They'd existed entirely in Alara Quinn's world, knowing nothing about Elena Volkov. That's kind of you, Elena said carefully. We just want you to know you're not alone. Divorce is terrible, and Marcus… Sharon hesitated. Well, we all have opinions about Marcus. Despite everything, Elena smiled. Do you? Let's just say none of us are particularly surprised. He always seemed like he was waiting for something better to come along. Sharon's voice lowered conspiratorially. Between you and me? You can do better. If only Sharon knew exactly how much better Elena could do. How much better she'd already done, years before Marcus, in a marriage that had never actually ended. Thank you, Elena said, meaning it. I appreciate the support. Anytime. And Alara, take care of yourself, okay? Don't let him make you feel like you weren't enough. You were always enough. He just couldn't see it. After Sharon hung up, Elena stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, phone still pressed to her ear. That conversation, that small gesture of solidarity from someone who existed in a completely different world than Romans, reminded her of something important. Not everyone operated with calculation and ruthlessness. Some people still offered kindness without agenda, still extended compassion without expecting return on investment. She'd almost forgotten that. Almost let Roman's world convince her that everyone was playing the same game, just at different stakes. Elena turned back toward the penthouse, Mikhail falling into step behind her. The walk had helped, even if it hadn't resolved anything. She felt steadier, more certain of what she was doing and why. Marcus deserved consequences. That hadn't changed, but maybe she didn't need to enjoy delivering them quite so much. Maybe she could be both Elena Volkov and something softer could exist in Roman's world without letting it consume everything gentle inside her. When she got back upstairs, Roman was exactly where she'd left him, still working through contracts like they were light reading. He looked up when she entered, searching her face. Better? He asked. Getting there. Elena crossed to where he sat, settling into the chair beside him. I got a call from someone in my old life, the book club women. They wanted to check on me. That's kind of them. It was. It reminded me that not everyone operates the way we do, that kindness still exists outside of strategy. She met his eyes. I don't want to lose that. Whatever else I become, I don't want to lose the part of me that can still appreciate genuine compassion. Roman considered this, then set aside his tablet and pulled her closer. You won't. Because that part of you is why I fell in love with you in the first place. You walked into my world with your eyes open and your heart intact, and you never let the darkness make you cruel. 7 years away didn't change that. This won't either. You sound very sure. I am sure, because I know you, Elena, better than you think. His hand came up to cup her face. You can be powerful without being heartless. You can be strategic without being cold. You can stand beside me and still be yourself. The two things aren't mutually exclusive. Elena leaned into his touch, letting herself believe him. Maybe he was right. Maybe she could navigate both worlds, could be Elena Volkov without completely abandoning Alara Quinn. Maybe strength didn't require sacrificing softness, or maybe that was just what she needed to believe to sleep at night. The third week arrived with the speed of something inevitable. 7 days until the gala. 7 days until she walked back into public view as Mrs. Volkov. 7 days until Marcus saw her again and understood exactly what he'd lost. Victor had obtained copies of the guest list through methods Elena didn't ask about. Marcus was attending, as predicted, though interestingly he was listed as Victoria's +1 rather than as Richard Ashford's legal counsel. A subtle demotion that probably hadn't escaped Marcus's notice. He'll be desperate by then, Victor predicted, reviewing seating arrangements. 3 more weeks of Richard dodging calls, Victoria growing distant, partners at his firm asking uncomfortable questions. He'll be looking for any lifeline, and he won't find one. No. By the time the gala arrives, Marcus Hale will be a man watching his future collapse in slow motion, unable to stop it, unable to understand why. Victor looked up. Are you ready for that? For seeing him broken? Elena thought about it honestly. I don't know. Ask me after it happens. The final dress fitting was 2 days before the gala. Anastasia had made microscopic adjustments to the midnight blue gown, changes so subtle Elena couldn't identify them, but that somehow made the whole thing fit even better. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw someone she barely recognized. Powerful, elegant, absolutely in control. Perfect, Anastasia declared. Now, shoes. The shoes were works of art, Louboutin, black patent leather, heels high enough to add 4 inches to Elena's height without being uncomfortable. Anastasia had her walk back and forth, checking the fall of the dress with the added height, making sure everything moved correctly. You look like you could buy the city, Anastasia observed with satisfaction. Roman already owns half of it. Yes, but now everyone will remember you helped him build it. Anastasia carefully packed the dress in a garment bag. Walk like that tomorrow night. Walk like the floor belongs to you. Because in that dress, with that man on your arm, it does. The night before the gala, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed beside Roman, listening to his steady breathing, and ran through scenarios. What she'd say when she saw Marcus, how she'd react to Victoria. Whether Richard Ashford would recognize her from years ago, from brief encounters at charity events when she'd still been Elena Volkov the first time. You're thinking too loud again, Roman murmured without opening his eyes. How do you do that? Practice. Years of sleeping next to you taught me the difference between resting silence and planning silence. He rolled over, pulling her against him. Talk to me. I'm nervous. I know. What if I mess this up? What if I freeze or say the wrong thing or... You won't. Roman's voice was absolutely certain. You spent 3 weeks preparing for this. You know how to walk, how to talk, how to hold yourself. You know who you are. Tomorrow night, you just remind everyone else. Marcus will be there. I know. I haven't seen him since that night, since he handed me the divorce papers. Elena's hands curled into fists against Roman's chest. What if seeing him makes me feel something I don't want to feel? Like what? I don't know. Regret? Sympathy? Weakness? Roman was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was careful. Elena, listen to me. Whatever you feel tomorrow when you see Marcus Hale, whatever emotion comes up, it's allowed. You don't have to perform for me or Victor or anyone else. If you want to feel sorry for him, feel sorry. If you want to feel angry, feel angry. If you want to walk away and never think about him again, do that. The point of tomorrow isn't revenge, it's closure. It feels like revenge. Maybe, but revenge and closure can look similar from the outside. The difference is internal. Are you doing this to hurt him or to heal yourself? Roman's hand traced patterns on her back. Because one of those is sustainable and the other will eat you alive. Elena thought about that, about the difference between hurting Marcus and healing herself, and wondered if she even knew anymore. The lines had blurred over 3 weeks of preparation and planning until the whole thing felt like an elaborate performance she was staging for an audience of one. I want him to know I'm okay, she said finally. Better than okay. I want him to see me happy and powerful and completely beyond his reach. I want him to understand that discarding me was the biggest mistake of his life, and that he'll spend the rest of his life wondering what would have happened if he'd chosen differently. Then that's what tomorrow is about. Not destroying him, just showing him what could have been. Roman kissed her forehead. Now sleep. Tomorrow's a big day, and you need to look perfect. No pressure. None at all. His voice held a smile. You're just reclaiming your place as one of the most powerful women in New York while wearing a dress that costs more than most people's cars and demonstrating to your ex-husband that leaving you was the stupidest decision anyone has ever made. Completely low stakes. Despite everything, Elena laughed, and eventually, wrapped in Roman's arms with his steady heartbeat beneath her ear, she actually managed to sleep. The Garrison Hotel had been built in 1927 by a railroad baron who'd wanted something grand enough to match his ego, and a century later it still delivered on that promise. The ballroom could hold 500 people comfortably, with ceilings that soared 30 feet high and chandeliers that had been imported from Vienna. Tonight, it was packed with exactly the kind of people who appreciated historical excess, old money, new money, and the lawyers and bankers who facilitated the transfer between the two. Elena stood in the private suite Roman had reserved, staring at her reflection and trying to recognize herself. The midnight blue dress moved like water, the Louboutins added height that changed her entire posture, and the stylist had done something with her hair that made it look effortless, despite the 45 minutes of careful work. She looked like someone who belonged in rooms like this, like someone who'd never chopped vegetables in a modest kitchen or worried about grocery budgets, like someone Marcus Hale had been catastrophically stupid to underestimate. "Stop frowning," Roman said from behind her, already in his tuxedo and looking unfairly comfortable in it. "You'll get lines." "I'm not frowning, I'm concentrating." "Same thing." He moved closer, adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror beside her. "You look perfect." "I look terrified." "No one else will see that. They'll see confidence and power, and a woman who knows exactly who she is." Roman's hand settled on her shoulders, warm through the thin fabric. "Trust me. I've been watching people read you for 3 weeks. You've got this down." Elena wanted to believe him. She'd spent 3 weeks preparing for exactly this moment: how to walk, how to talk, how to exist in spaces where everyone was evaluating everyone else. But preparation was different than execution. And standing here on the edge of walking into that ballroom, she felt every one of her old insecurities trying to claw their way back to the surface. "What if he doesn't care?" she asked quietly. "What if I walk out there and Marcus sees me and just doesn't care?" Roman turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Then he's even stupider than we thought." "But Elena, this isn't about whether Marcus cares. It's about whether you care. You're not doing this for his validation. You're doing this for yours." A knock on the door interrupted them. Victor entered without waiting for permission, dressed in a tuxedo that probably cost less than Roman's but looked equally sharp. "They're ready for you," he said. "Most of the guests have arrived. The Ashfords are at their table. Marcus is with them, looking uncomfortable." "Already?" Elena's stomach clenched. Richard's been cold to him all evening, from what our people are saying. Victoria keeps checking her phone. Marcus is trying too hard to be charming, and it's coming across desperate. Victor's expression was carefully neutral, but Elena heard satisfaction underneath. He's dying out there, slowly, in front of everyone. Roman checked his watch. "Perfect timing. We'll make our entrance during cocktail hour, maximum visibility. Everyone watching, everyone taking note." "No pressure," Elena muttered. "You've survived worse than a party full of rich people," Roman reminded her, offering his arm. "Come on. Time to remind New York who you are." The walk from the suite to the ballroom felt longer than it actually was. Elena focused on breathing, on keeping her shoulders back and her chin up, on channeling every lesson Margaret had drilled into her. She could hear the noise from the ballroom growing louder, conversation and laughter and the gentle clink of expensive glassware. They paused at the entrance, just out of sight. Victor had already slipped ahead to make sure everything was positioned correctly. Roman squeezed Elena's hand once, a brief gesture of solidarity, then released it. "Ready?" he asked. Elena thought about Marcus handing her divorce papers on their anniversary, about 7 years of making herself smaller, about the way he'd looked at her like she was ordinary, forgettable, disposable. "Ready," she said. They stepped into the ballroom together, and Elena felt the shift in atmosphere like a physical thing. Conversations didn't stop. That would have been too obvious, but they stuttered. People noticed. Heads turned, subtle but unmistakable. The name Volkov still carried weight in this city, and Roman's absence from social events for the past 7 years had been noticed. His return, with Elena on his arm, was the kind of statement that would fuel gossip for months. "Roman Volkov!" a voice called out, warm and slightly drunk. Jonathan Pierce, some hedge fund manager Victor had briefed her about. "Didn't expect to see you at one of these things." "Jonathan." Roman's smile was pleasant and revealed nothing. "Elena, you remember Jonathan Pierce?" Elena didn't, but she smiled anyway. Of course, lovely to see you again. Jonathan's eyes flickered over her, clearly trying to reconcile the elegant woman in front of him with whatever memory he had from years ago. You look wonderful, both of you. How long has it been? Too long, Roman said smoothly. We've been keeping a lower profile, but certain events are worth making exceptions for. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease. Roman greeting people he needed to acknowledge while steering them toward their assigned table. Elena recognized some faces from Victor's briefings, others from her previous life in this world. Some people smiled with genuine warmth. Others smiled with calculation, already wondering what Roman's reappearance meant for their various schemes and alliances. And then she saw Marcus. He was across the ballroom, standing near the bar with Victoria and an older couple that had to be her parents. He wore a tuxedo that looked slightly too new, like he'd bought it specifically for tonight and hadn't worn it enough to be comfortable in it. Victoria was beautiful in a conventional way, blonde and polished, with the kind of smile that looked expensive because it was. She had her hand on Marcus's arm, but the gesture seemed performative rather than affectionate. Marcus was talking to Richard Ashford, gesturing with his free hand in a way that suggested he was trying to make a point. Richard's expression was polite but distant, the look of someone enduring a conversation rather than engaging in one. Elena watched this scene for a long moment, feeling something complicated twist in her chest. 3 weeks ago, she would have been jealous of Victoria, the beautiful girlfriend, the wealthy family, the easy confidence that came from never having been told she wasn't enough. But looking at them now, Elena saw the cracks, saw Marcus trying too hard, saw Victoria's attention wandering, saw Richard's barely concealed impatience, saw exactly what Victor had promised she'd see, a man watching his future crumble and not understanding why. Elena? Roman's voice was quiet, concerned. You all right? Fine, just taking it in. We don't have to approach them. We can stay on this side of the room all night if you prefer. The offer was genuine, but they both knew she couldn't take it. This whole evening was about being seen, about making a statement. Hiding from Marcus would undermine everything. No, I want to say hello. Elena straightened her shoulders, channeling Margaret's lessons about posture and presence. Let's get this over with. They made their way across the ballroom, stopping occasionally to greet other guests. Elena was hyper-aware of Marcus in her peripheral vision, wondering when he'd notice her, how he'd react. Part of her wanted to be watching his face when recognition hit. Part of her wanted to never see his expression at all. They were perhaps 10 feet away when it happened. Marcus glanced over mid-sentence, probably looking for a waiter, and his gaze landed on Elena. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, just casual assessment of another guest. Then his brain processed what his eyes were seeing, and his entire face changed. The color drained from his cheeks. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He stared at Elena like she was a ghost, like she couldn't possibly be real, like the universe had just broken fundamental rules of reality by putting her in this ballroom wearing that dress, standing next to that man. Victoria noticed his reaction and followed his gaze. Her eyes narrowed slightly, clearly trying to figure out who this woman was and why Marcus looked like he'd seen something impossible. Richard Ashford noticed too. And unlike his daughter and Marcus, Richard's face showed recognition. He'd met Elena before, years ago at events like this one, back when she'd been Roman's wife the first time. His expression shifted from polite social mask to something more careful, more calculated. Roman guided Elena directly into their circle with the kind of smooth confidence that made it impossible to avoid the interaction. Richard, Roman said warmly, extending his hand, good to see you again. I believe you've met my wife, Elena. Richard shook Roman's hand with the grip of someone who understood power dynamics. Roman, Elena, what a pleasant surprise. I didn't realize you'd be here tonight. We don't make many public appearances, Roman said, but this seemed like an important event to support. Victoria was still trying to figure out what was happening, her eyes moving between Elena and Marcus, who still looked like he'd been hit with a brick. Mrs. Ashford, a thin woman with the particular pinched look of someone who'd spent decades being disappointed by everything, watched the exchange with bored interest. I don't believe we've met, Victoria said to Elena, her tone friendly but with an edge underneath. Victoria Ashford. Elena took her hand, matching her grip exactly. Elena Volkov. Lovely to meet you. Volkov, oh, Victoria repeated, and something clicked in her expression. She glanced at her father, then back at Elena. You're Roman's wife. I am. I thought... Victoria stopped herself, clearly rethinking whatever she'd been about to say. Probably something about Elena being Roman's ex-wife, based on whatever Marcus had told her. That is, Marcus mentioned... Did he? Elena's voice was pleasant, conversational. She turned to Marcus, who looked like he desperately wanted to be anywhere else. Hello, Marcus. It took him a moment to find his voice. Alara, I mean... He stopped, clearly flustered. You look different. Do I? Elena tilted her head slightly, a gesture she'd learned from Roman. I suppose I do. It's amazing what 3 weeks can do. The number hung in the air, deliberate. 3 weeks since Marcus had handed her divorce papers. 3 weeks since he'd called her ordinary. 3 weeks since he'd dismissed 7 years of marriage like they were an inconvenience he'd finally solved. Victoria's eyes sharpened. You two know each other? We were married, Elena said before Marcus could answer. 7 years. He didn't mention it? The silence that followed was exquisite. Victoria's face went through several expressions: confusion, realization, anger, before settling on carefully controlled neutrality. Richard Ashford's eyebrows rose slightly. Mrs. Ashford actually looked interested for the first time all evening. You're his ex-wife, Victoria said slowly. Technically, the divorce isn't final yet, Elena corrected gently. These things take time. Marcus finally found words. What are you doing here? The question came out more accusatory than he probably intended. Roman's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Elena's waist. Not restraining, just supporting. The same thing you are, Elena said calmly. Attending a charity gala. Roman and I support several foundations that benefit from tonight's proceeds. The arts education program specifically. Arts education, Richard repeated, and his tone had shifted to something more engaged. The Meridian Foundation by any chance? Actually, yes. I've recently taken over operational control. We're doing a complete restructuring, focusing on program quality over geographic spread. Elena smiled at him. It's been fascinating work, getting to know the organization and the community it serves. Richard's expression changed completely. You're the new director they brought in. The board mentioned someone was doing a comprehensive review, but they didn't mention it was you. We prefer to keep things quiet during transitions. Less disruption that way. Elena could feel Marcus staring at her, could sense his mind trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the woman he'd dismissed 3 weeks ago. Though I suppose the announcement will be public soon enough. Fascinating. Richard actually looked impressed. I've heard good things about the changes you're implementing. Consolidating resources, improving outcomes. Smart approach. Thank you. It's important work. Elena paused, then added casually, Roman and I both believe in investing in things that matter beyond profit margins. Art education for underserved children seems like an excellent place to start. The message was subtle but clear. Roman Volkov, the man who just acquired 40% of Richard's company, the man whose approval Richard now needed to maintain his business, was married to a woman doing meaningful charitable work. Marcus, by contrast, was just a lawyer who had divorced that woman because she wasn't useful enough for his ambitions. Victoria had caught the subtext, too. Her hand dropped from Marcus's arm, a small gesture that probably only Elena noticed because she was watching for it. How long have you two been back together? Victoria asked, her voice carefully casual. We were never actually apart, Roman said, his tone pleasant, just keeping a lower profile. You know how it is. Sometimes privacy is worth more than visibility. It was a lie, but a beautifully constructed one. And watching Marcus's face, Elena knew he'd caught it too. He'd divorced someone he thought was alone and powerless. He'd actually divorced someone who was married to one of the most powerful men in New York and had simply been choosing not to exercise that power. The realization was hitting him in real time, and Elena could see each stage of understanding cross his face. Shock, confusion, horror, and finally, devastating comprehension. Excuse me, Marcus said abruptly. I need some air. He walked away without waiting for permission or explanation, heading toward the terrace doors with the stiff gait of someone barely holding themselves together. Victoria watched him go with narrowed eyes, clearly calculating whether to follow or cut her losses. "You'll have to excuse Marcus," Victoria said after a moment, her smile brittle. "He's been under a lot of stress lately, work pressures." "Of course," Elena said sympathetically. "The legal profession can be demanding, especially when client relationships shift unexpectedly." Richard's expression flickered with something, guilt, maybe, or recognition that his cooling toward Marcus was now uncomfortably public knowledge. "Well," Mrs. Ashford said, speaking for the first time in her thin patrician voice, "this has been enlightening. Victoria, dear, perhaps we should check on the silent auction before dinner." "Boshi I Botis Sets" was clearly a dismissal, a way to extract themselves from an increasingly uncomfortable situation. Victoria followed her parents without argument, though she glanced back once at the terrace where Marcus had disappeared. Once they were alone, Elena let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "You did well," Roman murmured. "Better than well." Richard was impressed. Victoria's doubting Marcus, and Marcus is currently having what looks like an existential crisis. "I think I'm going to be sick. Not in that dress. Anastasia would kill us both." Roman guided her toward their table, which was mercifully on the opposite side of the ballroom from the Ashfords. "Sit, breathe. The hard part's over." Victor materialized from somewhere, holding a glass of water that Elena accepted gratefully. "That was perfect," Victor said, sliding into the seat beside her. "Richard's already talking to people about the foundation work you're doing. Victoria looks like she's rethinking her life choices. And Marcus," he glanced toward the terrace, "Marcus is learning expensive lessons about assumptions." Elena drank the water, trying to steady her shaking hands. She'd done it. She'd faced Marcus, had demonstrated exactly what he'd thrown away, had shown him in the most public way possible that he'd made a catastrophic mistake. It should feel satisfying, triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. "I need a minute," she said, standing. "I'm going to the restroom." "Want me to come?" Victor offered. "No, I just need a minute alone. I'll be fine." The ladies' room was mercifully empty, all gleaming marble and expensive fixtures. Elena leaned against the counter, studying her reflection and trying to reconcile the woman in the mirror with the way she felt inside. She looked powerful, composed, like someone who'd just won an important battle. She felt like she'd just kicked a dog that was already bleeding. The door opened and Victoria Ashford walked in, stopping short when she saw Elena. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victoria moved to the mirror, checking her lipstick with the careful attention of someone buying time to think. "So," Victoria said finally, not looking at Elena, "you're the ex-wife. Current wife, technically. To Roman, I mean. The divorce from Marcus isn't finalized." "Right. Because you were married to someone else the whole time." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Does Marcus know that you were married to Roman when you married him?" "I thought I was divorced. The papers never got signed." Elena watched Victoria's reflection. "For what it's worth, I didn't know that until recently." "How convenient." "It wasn't. It was complicated." Elena paused. "Did Marcus tell you anything about me?" "Just that you were his wife, that it didn't work out, that you weren't—" Victoria stopped herself. "Wasn't what? Good enough? Ambitious enough? Connected enough?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. "He said similar things to me about his reasons for leaving," Elena said quietly. "That I made him look ordinary, that I didn't fit his new life, that he needed someone who understood his ambitions." She met Victoria's eyes in the mirror. "Did he tell you any of that?" "Some of it." Victoria's voice was careful. "He said you grew apart, that you wanted different things." "We did want different things. I wanted a partner. He wanted an accessory." Elena moved to the sink, washing her hands, even though they didn't need it. "For what it's worth, I'm not here to cause problems for you. I'm here to remind Marcus of what he lost. You just happen to be collateral." "Collateral," Victoria repeated. "That's a nice way of saying you're destroying his career and his relationship to prove a point." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just existing in my actual life instead of the small one I was hiding in. If that destroys Marcus, That says more about how fragile his position was than anything about me. Victoria turned to face her directly. You're with Roman Volkov, the Roman Volkov, who just bought 40% of my father's company. I am. And you're running the Meridian Foundation. I am. And you were doing what exactly when you were married to Marcus? Playing housewife? The question wasn't entirely hostile. There was genuine confusion underneath, like Victoria couldn't reconcile the powerful woman in front of her with whoever Marcus had described. I was hiding, Elena said honestly. I left Roman 7 years ago because I thought I wanted a normal life, a safe life. I thought Marcus offered that. Turns out I was just trading one performance for another. And now? Now I'm done performing. I'm being exactly who I am, with all the power and connections and resources that come with it. Elena dried her hands on a towel that probably cost more than her old grocery budget. Marcus wanted someone connected and powerful. He had her all along. He just didn't know it. Victoria absorbed this, her expression unreadable. My father's already pulling back from him. I can see it happening. The way he redirects Marcus's calls excludes him from meetings. Your husband's involvement just accelerated something that was already in motion. I know, and you don't care. I care, just not enough to stop it. Elena moved toward the door, then paused. Victoria? For what it's worth, you seem smart enough to know when you're in a sinking ship. Might want to find a lifeboat before you go down with it. She left before Victoria could respond, stepping back into the noise and light of the ballroom. Dinner was being served, guests finding their assigned tables. Roman caught her eye from across the room, a silent question. Elena nodded. She was fine, or at least fine enough. The terrace doors were still open, warm air mixing with the ballroom's aggressive air conditioning. Elena could see Marcus out there, leaning against the railing, staring at nothing. He looked small from this distance, diminished. She should feel satisfied. This was exactly what she'd wanted. Marcus understanding what he'd lost, watching his carefully constructed future fall apart, learning that underestimating people had consequences. Instead, she felt tired. Second thoughts? Victor asked, appearing at her elbow with champagne. Something like that. Elena took the glass. Is it normal to win and still feel like you lost something? Depends on what you were fighting for. Revenge? No, that always feels hollow eventually. Justice? Sometimes. Closure? Victor shrugged. That one's personal. Very philosophical for a Thursday night. I contain multitudes. He nodded toward the terrace. He's been out there for 20 minutes. No phone calls, no texts. Just staring at the city like it personally wronged him. Maybe it did. Maybe we all did. Elena sipped her champagne. I keep thinking about what Roman said, that this is about closure, not revenge. But I'm not sure I know the difference anymore. The difference is what happens next. Revenge keeps going, keeps escalating, needs constant feeding. Closure is finite. You set the record straight, and then you move on. Victor's expression was serious. So which one is this for you? Elena thought about that question through dinner, through the speeches and the silent auction and the endless circulation of guests networking and posing for photos. She smiled and made conversation and played the role of Mrs. Volkov with increasing ease, but underneath she was still trying to answer Victor's question. Which one was this? Revenge or closure? She was still thinking about it when Marcus finally came back inside, moving through the crowd like a ghost. He didn't approach their table, didn't try to talk to her again. He just existed in the same space, visibly diminished, while Victoria kept a careful distance and Richard avoided him entirely. Around 11, as the event was winding down, Elena found herself near the coat check at the same time as Marcus. They stood in awkward proximity, waiting for attendants to retrieve their things, not looking at each other. Finally, Marcus spoke. You never told me. Elena didn't pretend not to know what he meant. You never asked. I asked about your past. You said it was boring, that there was nothing worth discussing. I said my past was complicated, and I'd rather not talk about it. You heard what you wanted to hear. Elena accepted her wrap from the attendant. You wanted simple, Marcus. I gave you simple. It just wasn't real.
7 years. His voice was rough. 7 years, and I never knew who you actually were. 7 years, and you never cared enough to find out. Elena turned to face him fully for the first time since the ballroom. You wanted a wife who made you comfortable, who didn't challenge you, who stayed small enough to make you feel big. I gave you exactly that. The mistake wasn't that I hid who I was. It's that you were relieved when I did. Marcus's face twisted. That's not fair. But none of this is fair, Marcus. You divorcing me on our anniversary wasn't fair. You calling me ordinary wasn't fair. You using me for 7 years and then discarding me when someone more useful came along wasn't fair. Elena's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. But I'm not here to debate fairness. I'm here to show you that the woman you thought was ordinary never actually existed. She was just a role I was playing, and now I'm done playing it. So this is what? Revenge? This is me existing. You're the one who decided that was a threat. Roman appeared then, his timing impeccable as always. Ready? He asked Elena, offering his arm. Yes. She turned back to Marcus one last time. Goodbye, Marcus. I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. I just hope when you find it, you're smart enough to recognize it. They left him standing there, walked out into the cool night air where Victor had already brought the car around. Elena didn't look back. Didn't need to. Whatever she'd come to this gala to accomplish, revenge, closure, vindication, was done now. In the car, Roman took her hand. How do you feel? Elena considered the question honestly. Empty, satisfied, sad, relieved, all of it at once. That's normal. Is it? After something like tonight? Yes. Roman squeezed her hand. You faced down your past and came out standing. That's worth feeling complicated about. Victor, sitting across from them, was already on his phone. Marcus just left. Alone, Victoria stayed with her parents. Let me guess, Elena said. She's cutting her losses. Smart girl. Richard's already making calls about new legal counsel. Whitmore and Chen will get the official notice by Monday. Victor looked up. It's over, Elena. Marcus Hale's trajectory just hit terminal velocity. By next week, he'll be lucky to keep his job, let alone make partner. It was exactly what they'd planned, exactly what Elena had wanted when this started. But hearing it stated so clinically, so finally, made her feel something she hadn't expected. Pity. Not enough to regret what she'd done. Not enough to want to stop it. Just enough to recognize that Marcus was human, flawed and desperate and broken in ways he probably didn't understand yet. Just enough to acknowledge that destroying someone, even someone who deserved it, came with a cost. I need to ask you both something, Elena said quietly, and I need honest answers. Roman and Victor exchanged glances. Am I becoming someone I shouldn't be? Elena continued. Someone who solves problems by crushing people instead of fixing things? No, Roman said immediately. You're becoming someone who understands that sometimes people need to face consequences for their choices. That's not cruelty. That's accountability. Victor? Victor considered longer before answering. I think you're learning to use power instead of running from it. Whether that makes you someone you shouldn't be depends on what you do next. Tonight was about Marcus. Tomorrow can be about something else. Someone else. The foundation work, the charitable causes, the ways you choose to use influence for more than just settling scores. He met her eyes. You're not defined by your worst moments, Elena. You're defined by the pattern. So what pattern are you building? The question sat in Elena's mind all the way home. Through the elevator ride up to the penthouse. Through the process of taking off the dress and the heels and the armor she'd worn all night. She stood in the bathroom in Roman's shirt, scrubbing makeup off her face, and thought about patterns. 7 years ago, she'd run from power because she'd seen what it cost. Tonight, she'd reclaimed it and used it to hurt someone who'd hurt her first. Tomorrow, she could choose what came next, whether she became someone who wielded power responsibly or someone who wielded it carelessly, whether she became the woman Marcus thought she was or someone better. Roman appeared in the doorway, already changed for bed.
You're thinking loud again. Hazard of the evening. Elena dried her face. Thank you. For what? For letting tonight be complicated. For not making me choose between feeling satisfied and feeling human. She turned to face him. For understanding that I can be both powerful and uncertain at the same time. You don't have to thank me for seeing you clearly. Roman pulled her close, and Elena let herself lean into him. That's just love. Later, lying in bed with Roman's breathing evening out beside her, Elena thought about everything that had happened. About Marcus's face when he'd realized who she was. About Victoria's calculated distance. About Richard's smooth pivot away from someone who was no longer useful. About the hollow satisfaction of winning a game she was starting to realize nobody actually won. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better. M. Elena stared at the message for a long time. It was too little, too late, and they both knew it. But it was also human, genuine in a way Marcus rarely managed. An acknowledgement that he'd failed, that he understood what he'd lost, that maybe somewhere under all the ambition and calculation was someone capable of recognizing his own mistakes. She didn't respond, didn't need to. The message wasn't asking for forgiveness or second chances. It was just a statement, an ending. Elena deleted it and set down her phone. Tomorrow, she'd focus on the foundation, on building something that mattered, on being the person she wanted to be instead of just the person Marcus had underestimated. Tonight, she'd sleep. And when she woke up, she'd start defining herself by what she built instead of what she'd torn down. That, at least, felt like closure. The morning after the gala arrived with the kind of gray sky that suggested rain without committing to it. Elena woke to find Roman already gone, a note on his pillow written in his precise handwriting. Early meeting, coffee's ready, take the day for yourself. R. She appreciated the gesture more than she could articulate. After last night's performance, because that's what it had been, a carefully orchestrated display of power and reclamation, the idea of having nothing demanded of her felt like oxygen. Elena took her coffee to the windows overlooking the city and watched New York wake up. From this height, the people below looked like pieces on a game board, moving in patterns they probably thought were random but were actually deeply predictable. Work, home, consumption, sleep. Repeat. She'd been one of those pieces for 7 years, following Marcus's script, playing the role he'd written for her. Never again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victor. Whitmore and Chen just announced they're not renewing Marcus's contract. He's out by end of month. Thought you'd want to know. Elena stared at the message. This was it. The final domino falling. Marcus wouldn't just lose the partnership. He'd lose his job entirely. His career, his relationship with Victoria, his carefully constructed future. All of it. Gone. She waited for the surge of satisfaction, the vindication she'd been chasing for 3 weeks. It didn't come. Instead, she felt something closer to exhaustion. Thanks for letting me know, she typed back. Want me to keep monitoring? Elena thought about it. Did she? Did she want to keep track of every painful detail of Marcus's downfall, watch him spiral in real time, collect evidence of his suffering like trophies? No, she wrote, I'm done. Let him figure out his own life. The response came immediately. Good. That's growth. Elena set down her phone and finished her coffee in silence. Victor was right. It was growth. The version of herself who'd stood in that kitchen 3 weeks ago, absorbing Marcus's dismissal with quiet devastation, would have wanted to watch him burn, would have fed on his pain like it could somehow balance her own. But that version of herself had been operating from a place of powerlessness, of hurt so deep it demanded witnessing. This version, the one standing in a penthouse wearing silk pajamas that cost more than her old car, married to a man who controlled half the city, running a foundation that actually mattered. This version could afford to be gracious, or if not gracious, at least indifferent. The divorce papers arrived by courier that afternoon. Elena signed them without ceremony, without the emotional weight she'd expected. They were just papers, legal documentation of something that had ended weeks ago in every way that mattered. Marcus could have his official divorce. She didn't need the title of his ex-wife. She had better ones. A week later, Elena stood in the Meridian Foundation's largest classroom, watching 15 teenagers work on a mural. The consolidation plan she'd presented to the board had been approved unanimously, and the implementation was already showing results. 3 scattered programs had become one focused initiative with triple the resources and half the overhead. The kids painting the mural ranged from 13 to 17, a mix of backgrounds and skill levels united by the fact that they'd never had access to quality art instruction before. The lead instructor, a woman named Jasmine, who'd been with the foundation for 6 years, stood beside Elena, watching them work. "This wouldn't have been possible under the old structure," Jasmine said quietly. "We would have had 5 kids in a rented church basement with supplies we bought ourselves. Now look at them." Elena looked. Professional-grade paints, proper brushes, a wall they actually owned instead of borrowed. An instructor who was being paid what she was worth instead of working 3 jobs to make rent. Kids who were learning real skills instead of just being warehoused for a few hours after school. "It's not charity," Elena said. "It's investment. These kids have talent. We're just giving them tools to develop it. Still, it matters that someone cares enough to do it right." Jasmine hesitated, then added, "I heard rumors about who you are, who you're married to. Some of the staff were worried this was just going to be some rich lady's vanity project. And now? Now they see you here 3 times a week, reviewing budgets at midnight, fighting with landlords about facility improvements. You're not performing, you're working." Jasmine smiled. "So whatever else is true about you, this part is real." The observation hit harder than Elena expected. After 3 weeks of carefully constructed performances, becoming Elena Volkov again, reclaiming power, orchestrating Marcus's downfall, having someone recognize genuine effort felt validating in a way revenge never had. "Thank you," Elena said simply. That evening, she met Roman for dinner at a small Italian place in Brooklyn that didn't take reservations and didn't care who you were. It was his choice, and Elena understood why. After the gala's performance, after weeks of strategic maneuvering, they both needed someplace where they could just be people eating pasta instead of pieces on a chessboard. "Victor says you stopped monitoring Marcus," Roman said, twirling spaghetti with focused precision. "I did. Why?" Elena considered the question while cutting into her chicken. "Because I realized I didn't care anymore. Not enough to keep watching, anyway. He's just another person making mistakes and living with consequences now. Not my problem." Roman studied her face. "That's different than 3 weeks ago." "3 weeks ago I was angry. Now I'm just done." Elena set down her fork. "I got what I needed from the gala. He knows what he lost. Everyone who matters knows what he lost. Continuing to track his misery doesn't add anything except cruelty, and I don't want to be cruel. Even though he was cruel to you, especially because he was cruel to me, I don't want to become someone who thinks hurting people is the same as healing from them." Elena took a sip of wine. "Marcus treated me like I was disposable. I proved I wasn't. That's enough." Roman reached across the table, taking her hand. "I'm proud of you. This version of you, the one who can be powerful without being vindictive, this is who you were always meant to become. I had good teachers. You had experiences. What you did with them was your choice." Roman's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Elena, I need to tell you something about these past 7 years." The shift in his tone made Elena's stomach clench. "All right. When you left, I was angry, hurt. I wanted to drag you back, make you remember what we had, force you to acknowledge that running wouldn't fix whatever you were running from." Roman's voice stayed steady, but Elena heard the old pain underneath. "But Victor talked me out of it. Reminded me that holding someone against their will isn't love, it's imprisonment. So I let you go. Signed the trust over, made sure you were protected financially, and waited. For 7 years. For however long it took, because I knew, not hoped, knew, that eventually you'd realize what I'd realized a long time ago. That you were never meant for small lives or small men. That trying to be ordinary was like trying to fit the ocean in a teacup." He squeezed her hand. "But here's what I never told you. About 2 years in, I had doubts. Started thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe you'd actually found happiness with Marcus. Maybe I should move on. Elena's chest tightened. What changed your mind? I saw you at a grocery store in your neighborhood. You were picking up dinner, looking exhausted, moving through the aisles like everything was heavy, and Marcus was with you, on his phone the entire time, not helping, not noticing you at all. I watched you try to get his attention 3 times. He ignored you every time. Roman's expression was carefully neutral. And I knew then that you weren't happy. You were just hiding, and eventually hiding becomes unbearable. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, remembering that day. She'd been trying to plan a dinner for Marcus's colleagues, trying to do everything right, trying to be the supportive wife he needed. And he'd spent the entire trip on the phone with someone from work, treating her like furniture. You saw that and didn't say anything? What could I say? Your husband treats you badly, come back to me? You would have seen it as manipulation. It had to be your choice, Elena. You had to recognize it yourself. Roman brought her hand to his lips. But watching you realize you'd made a mistake in slow motion over 5 years? That was the hardest thing I've ever done. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to understand something. The patience I showed you, the understanding, the willingness to wait, that's not normal in my world. In my world, people are assets or obstacles. They're useful or they're not. They contribute or they're cut loose. Roman's eyes held hers. But you were never an asset to me, Elena. You were always a person. Complicated, stubborn, brilliant, flawed. And I loved all of it, even the parts that made you run away. Elena realized she was crying, tears sliding down her face in the middle of this unremarkable restaurant where they were just 2 people having dinner. That's the difference between you and Marcus, she said softly. He loved what I could do for him. You loved who I actually was. Exactly. And that's what I need you to remember going forward. Power is seductive. Control is addictive. But the moment you start seeing people as pieces instead of people, you lose the thing that makes power worth having. Roman wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Stay human, Elena. Stay complicated. Never let this world make you simple. The waiter appeared then, clearly uncomfortable about interrupting what was obviously an emotional moment, and they took the interruption to reset. Ordered dessert, changed subjects, talked about the foundation and Roman's business, and Victor's love life, which apparently was hilarious. By the time they left, Elena felt steadier, clearer about who she wanted to be. 2 months after the gala, Elena was reviewing quarterly budgets for the foundation when her assistant knocked on her office door. Someone here to see you, Maria said. No appointment. She says it's personal. Who is it? Victoria Ashford. Elena's hand stilled on her pen. She hadn't seen Victoria since the gala, hadn't thought about her much beyond occasional curiosity about what happened with Marcus. The fact that she was here, unannounced, was interesting. Send her in. Victoria entered wearing business casual instead of the designer clothes from the gala, looking somehow both older and younger at the same time. She stood awkwardly in the doorway until Elena gestured to a chair. Thank you for seeing me, Victoria said, settling into the seat with visible discomfort. I'm curious why you're here. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure myself. Victoria twisted her hands in her lap. I've been thinking about that night, about what you said in the bathroom, about being collateral damage. And you were right, I was. Marcus was using me the same way he used you, for what I represented instead of who I was. Difference is, I didn't realize it until you showed me. Victoria's voice was quiet but steady. After the gala, after my father cut him loose, Marcus fell apart, started calling constantly, showing up at my apartment, trying to convince me we could still make it work. He couldn't understand why I wouldn't save him. Did you? No. Because I finally saw what you'd seen years ago, that he didn't actually want me. He wanted access to my father's money and connections. The minute those disappeared, I became as disposable as you were. Victoria met Elena's eyes. I'm not here to apologize for him, but I wanted to apologize to you. For being part of what hurt you, even if I didn't know I was. Elena absorbed this, trying to figure out what she felt. Anger? Satisfaction? Some complicated mix of both? You didn't owe me anything, Elena said finally. You didn't know about me.
Marcus made sure of that. I should have asked more questions.
Should have wondered why someone who seemed as driven as Marcus was okay with a divorce that left him with so little. Should have recognized the signs. Victoria shook her head. But I didn't want to see them. He was useful to me too, in ways I'm not proud of. So we were using each other, and neither of us was honest enough to admit it. What happened to him? After everything? Last I heard, he took a position at a smaller firm. Significant pay cut, no partnership track.
He moved out of the city. Victoria's expression was neutral. He tried to reach out a few times, always about getting back together, never about actually understanding what went wrong. I blocked his number eventually. Elena thought about Marcus's apologetic text the night of the gala, the one genuine moment of acknowledgement she'd seen from him. Maybe that had been it, his single moment of clarity before defaulting back to the same patterns that had gotten him here. "I'm sorry that happened," Elena said, meaning it. "Are you? I wouldn't blame you if you enjoyed watching him crash." "I thought I would. Turns out revenge is less satisfying than people think." Elena leaned back in her chair. "Victoria, can I ask you something? That night, when you realized who I was, did you feel betrayed by Marcus or just disappointed that your plan didn't work?" Victoria considered the question with visible honesty. "Both. Maybe more the second one, which probably says terrible things about me." She paused. "But that's kind of why I'm here. Watching you at that gala, seeing how you'd built this actual life with purpose and power and real work, it made me realize I've been doing the same thing Marcus was, focusing on appearances and connections instead of substance, playing roles instead of being someone. And you want to change that. I want to try, which is why—" Victoria took a breath, clearly nervous. "I heard the foundation is looking for a development director, someone to handle fundraising and donor relations. I know I have no experience in nonprofit work, but I do know how to work a room, how to manage high net worth individuals, how to translate wealth into action, and I want to use those skills for something that matters instead of just propping up my father's ego." Elena blinked, genuinely surprised. "You want to work here?" "I know it's presumptuous. I know I'm the last person you'd want around, but I'm asking anyway, because I think I could actually help, and because I need to prove to myself that I can be more than decorative." Victoria's voice steadied. "I'm not asking for favors. I'll interview properly, provide references, whatever you need. I just want a chance." Elena studied the woman sitting across from her, the one Marcus had chosen to replace her with, the one who'd been as much a victim of his calculations as Elena herself. She could see the genuine need underneath Victoria's request, the desire to be useful in ways that mattered. She could also see the risk. Hiring Victoria would mean constant reminders of Marcus, of that whole painful chapter. Would mean working closely with someone who'd been part of her lowest moment, even if unintentionally. But it would also mean giving someone the same chance Elena herself had taken, the opportunity to be more than the role they'd been playing. "Tell me why this matters to you," Elena said. "Real reasons, not the polished version." Victoria's shoulders dropped slightly, some performance falling away. "Because I'm tired of being Richard Ashford's daughter. Because every man I date sees dollar signs instead of me. Because I watched you walk into that gala like you owned the room, not because of your husband's money, but because you genuinely knew who you were, and I realized I've never felt that." She met Elena's gaze directly. "Because I'm 28 years old, and I've never done anything that mattered beyond making my father look good. And I'm terrified that if I don't change that now, I'll wake up at 40 and realize I never became a real person." The honesty was unexpected and deeply familiar. Elena had felt exactly that way at 21, before Roman, before understanding what power actually meant. The fear of never becoming more than other people's expectations. "I'll consider it," Elena said. "But I need to be clear about something. If you work here, you work. Real hours, real effort, real accountability. This isn't a place to play at being charitable while your trust fund does the heavy lifting. We're genuinely trying to help kids who have nothing, and that requires commitment." "I understand. And Marcus, if you're here, you need to be completely done with him. I won't have that drama in my organization." "I am, completely." Victoria's voice was firm. "Whatever I thought we had, it's over, has been since I realized what he actually wanted from me."
Elena made a decision that probably said something about how much she'd changed in 2 months. Send your resume to my assistant. I'll review it and we'll schedule a proper interview. No promises, but I'll give you a fair shot. Victoria's relief was visible. Thank you. Really, I know what it costs you to even consider this. After she left, Elena sat in her office for a long time thinking about second chances and the difference between revenge and growth. She could have dismissed Victoria outright, could have enjoyed the small cruelty of denying her something she genuinely wanted. But that would have been about Marcus, about old hurts, about being the person pain had tried to make her. Giving Victoria a chance, that was about being the person Elena wanted to become. Someone who understood that people were complicated, that growth was possible, that power used well meant lifting others instead of crushing them. She called Roman. Victoria Ashford just asked for a job, she said when he answered. Interesting. What did you tell her? That I'd consider it. Roman was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? That's complicated. Everything's complicated, but I think she's genuine. And I think she needs this the same way I needed the foundation, a chance to be something beyond who people assume she is. Elena paused. Plus, if I can work with her, if I can give her this opportunity and let it just be about the work instead of the history, then I've actually moved past Marcus. Really moved past him, not just performed moving past him. That's wise. Risky, but wise. Roman's voice held approval. You're building something good there, Elena, more than just a foundation, an actual philosophy about how to use power. I'm trying. Some days are easier than others. That's the only way it works. One decision at a time, choosing to be better instead of bitter. Roman paused. Come home early tonight. I want to take you somewhere. Where? It's a surprise. Just come home. The somewhere turned out to be the small apartment they'd shared when they first got married, before the penthouse, before the empire, when Roman was still building instead of maintaining. He'd kept it all these years, Elena discovered, maintained exactly as it had been. Why? She asked, standing in the living room that looked frozen in time. Because I wanted to remember where we started. What we were before power and complications and 7 years apart. Roman moved to the window overlooking a much less impressive view than the penthouse. I come here sometimes when I need perspective, when I need to remember that everything I built was supposed to be for us, not instead of us. Elena walked through the small space, touching surfaces that triggered memories. The kitchen where they'd cooked together because they couldn't afford to eat out constantly. The bathroom where Roman had taught her to clean a split lip from a fight he'd gotten into protecting her. The bedroom where they'd stayed up talking until dawn, planning futures that seemed impossibly distant. We were happy here, she said softly. We were. Because we were simple here. Not the life, the relationship. We were just two people trying to figure out how to build something together. Roman came to stand beside her. I want that again. Not the apartment, not the simplicity, but the partnership. The sense that we're building together instead of you hiding in my shadow or running from it. I want that too. Then let's make it real. Not just about Marcus or revenge or reclaiming what you lost. Let's make it about what we're creating, the foundation, the life, the future. Roman turned her to face him. I love you, Elena. I loved you when you were hiding as Alara Quinn. I loved you through 7 years of watching you try to be someone else. And I love you now that you're figuring out who you actually are. But I need to know, are you here because you want to be or because Marcus drove you back? The question was fair and terrifying. Elena thought about everything that had happened, the divorce, the gala, the foundation, the slow process of becoming someone she could actually respect. Both, she said honestly. Marcus was the catalyst. But Roman, I didn't come back just to escape him. I came back because I finally understood something I'd been running from for 7 years. That power isn't the enemy. Using it badly is. And that hiding from who I am doesn't make me safe. It just makes me small. And now? Now I want to be big, complicated, powerful in ways that matter. I want to build things that last and help people who need it and stand beside you as an equal instead of as an accessory. Elena took his hands. I'm here because I choose to be. Not because I need rescuing, but because I want partnership. With you, in all of it. Roman pulled her close, and Elena felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for years. This was home, not the penthouse or the apartment or the foundation offices, this feeling of being seen completely and chosen anyway. Then let's build something worth the wait, Roman murmured against her hair. 6 months after the gala, the Meridian Foundation held its first annual showcase. 300 kids participated, displaying artwork and performing music and demonstrating what proper investment in their talent could produce. The event raised $2 million in donations and attracted coverage from every major news outlet in the city. Elena stood in the back of the venue, watching it all unfold, Victoria beside her reviewing donor commitments on a tablet. Turned out Victoria was exactly what she'd claimed, brilliant at fundraising, tireless in donor cultivation, genuinely committed to the work. They'd never become friends exactly, but they'd developed something better, professional respect and shared purpose. "This is incredible," Victoria said, looking up from her tablet. "We've exceeded our goal by 40%. Good. Roll it into next year's budget. I want to expand to 2 more boroughs." Elena smiled, watching a teenage girl play violin with the kind of technical skill that came from actual instruction instead of YouTube videos. This is what matters. Not the money, the impact. I'm learning that, slowly. Victoria hesitated, then added, "I heard Marcus moved to Philadelphia, took a job at a tiny firm doing insurance defense. Good for him. I hope it works out. You really mean that, don't you? You're not just being diplomatic." Elena considered the question honestly. "I do mean it. Marcus made mistakes, but he's human. He deserves the chance to learn from them and build something better, just like I did, just like you're doing." "That's generous. More generous than I'd be if I were you." "Maybe, but holding on to anger is exhausting, and I have better things to do with my energy." Elena gestured to the showcase. "Like this, like building things that matter, like figuring out who I am when I'm not defined by who hurt me." Roman appeared then, having finished working the room and securing commitments from several major donors. He slid an arm around Elena's waist, and she leaned into him naturally. "Successful night," he observed. "Very. We're already planning expansion." "Of course you are. You don't know how to think small anymore." Roman's voice held affection and pride. "It's one of my favorite things about you." Later that night, back in the penthouse, Elena stood at the windows overlooking the city she'd tried so hard to leave and then fought so hard to reclaim. Roman was already in bed, reading contracts even at midnight because some habits never died. Victor had texted earlier with news she'd already decided not to care about. Marcus had gotten engaged to someone in Philadelphia, a school teacher who apparently thought he was wonderful. Elena hoped it worked out. Genuinely hoped this woman saw something in Marcus worth developing, that he'd learned enough from his mistakes to treat her better than he'd treated Elena. People could grow, change, become better than their worst moments. She was living proof of that. "Come to bed," Roman called. "You've done enough thinking for one day." Elena turned from the window, from the city of lights and complications and endless possibilities, and moved toward the bedroom. Toward the man who'd waited 7 years for her to figure out who she was. Toward the life she'd spent so long running from and had finally learned to claim. She wasn't Alara Quinn anymore, trying to be small enough to fit someone else's expectations. She wasn't even the Elena Volkov who'd run away 7 years ago, terrified of what power might cost her. She was something new, something forged from mistakes and growth, from pain and healing, from running away and coming back. She was simply herself. Complicated, flawed, powerful, human. Building something that mattered with someone who saw her completely and loved her anyway. And that, Elena thought as she settled into bed beside Roman, was worth every painful step it had taken to get here. "I love you," she said quietly. Roman set aside his contracts, giving her his full attention. "I love you too, past, present, future. All the versions of you. Even the one who ran away? Especially that one. She taught you what you needed to know to come back." Roman pulled her close. "We're all just works in progress, Elena. The point isn't perfection, it's direction, and you're moving in the right one." Elena closed her eyes, letting that truth settle into her bones. She'd spent 7 years trying to be perfect for Marcus, the perfect wife, the perfect accessory, the perfect performance of normalcy, and it had bought her nothing except the pain of being discarded when perfection wasn't enough. But this, being messy and complicated and powerful and flawed, this bought her something real: partnership, purpose, a life that mattered beyond just surviving it. Marcus had done her a favor in the end. Not on purpose, not with kindness, but a favor nonetheless. He'd broken the performance, shattered the illusion, forced her to choose between staying small or becoming herself. And in choosing herself, she'd found something he'd never understand. She'd found that power wasn't about crushing people or winning games or climbing ladders. It was about building things that lasted, lifting people who needed it, and using whatever influence you had to make the world slightly less cruel than you found it. That was the lesson Marcus would probably never learn, that Victoria was learning now, that Elena had paid 7 years to understand, and it was worth every painful moment. The city hummed outside the windows, millions of people pursuing their dreams and making their mistakes, and figuring out who they wanted to become. Elena was just one of them now, not hiding, not performing, just existing as fully and honestly as she could manage. Some days that meant being Elena Volkov, powerful and connected and operating at the highest levels of New York society. Some days it meant being the woman who'd hidden as Alara Quinn, who understood what it meant to feel ordinary and dismissed. Most days it meant being something between the two, navigating the complicated space where power and humanity intersected. And that was fine. Better than fine. Because life wasn't about choosing one version of yourself and killing off all the others. It was about integrating them all, the strong and the vulnerable, the calculated and the compassionate, the woman who could orchestrate someone's downfall and the one who could offer second chances to people who needed them. Elena Volkov had spent 7 years learning to be small. She'd spend the rest of her life learning to be whole. And if that meant carrying all her contradictions, all her complications, all the messy humanity that Marcus had wanted her to hide, then so be it. She was done hiding, done performing, done being anything less than completely, complicatedly, imperfectly herself. And in the morning, she'd wake up and keep building, keep growing, keep choosing to be better instead of bitter, to use power well instead of cruelly, to help instead of hurt. One decision at a time, one day at a time, one complicated, beautiful, fully human moment after another. That was the real victory. Not destroying Marcus, though she'd done that too. Not reclaiming power, though she'd achieved that as well. But reclaiming herself. All the parts she'd tried to hide or kill or run from, integrating them into something whole and real and worth the struggle it had taken to get here. Roman's breathing evened out beside her, and Elena let herself relax into the quiet comfort of being known and chosen anyway. This was what she'd been looking for all along. Not a life without complications, but the strength to handle them. Not a world without pain, but the resilience to grow from it instead of being broken by it. Marcus had tried to make her small. He'd failed because she'd always been big. She just needed the right catalyst to remember. And now she had, and she'd never forget again. Outside, the city continued its endless dance of ambition and hope and failure and redemption. Inside, Elena slept peacefully beside the man who'd taught her that power and love weren't mutually exclusive, that strength could coexist with vulnerability, that becoming who you were meant to be was always worth the cost. Tomorrow she'd continue building her foundation, helping kids discover their talents, proving that investment in people paid dividends that money couldn't measure. She'd work alongside Victoria, two women who'd both been underestimated by the same man and had both chosen to become more than his limited vision. She'd stand beside Roman as an equal partner, building an empire that mattered for reasons beyond just accumulation. But tonight, she simply rested, whole, complicated, powerful, human, and finally at peace with all of it. The story of Alara Quinn had ended the night Marcus handed her divorce papers. The story of Elena Volkov, the real one, the complete one, the woman who contained multitudes and refused to apologize for any of them, was just beginning, and it would be magnificent. The end.